Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Saiyan Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Ruthless Deku Got Ice Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Why did he think it was a good idea? How stupid was he to believe that All Might was any different? Be realistic. You should have given up on this dream long ago. Think of yourself and your loved ones. How would they feel if they were told that you died in the line of duty because you couldn't defend yourself? Please, my boy, wake up. You can't be a hero without a quirk. Was it all a lie? Whenever All Might proclaimed that anyone could be a hero, was it all just a publicity stunt? Just to make himself look good for the cameras and popular with the people? It didn't matter. His dream was no more, torn to shreds and laying in pieces at his feet. He didn't know how long he remained on the roof, in catatonic silence as the tears fell freely from his eyelids. He did not break down into hysterical sobs. He was too much in shock to even make a sound. What was he supposed to do now? If even his idol told him to give up, what use was there for him to continue? He had held on to the belief that All Might had the answer, one he sought after for years despite the bullying, ostracization, torment, and pain that he endured simply for pulling the short straw on the genetic lottery. But now, it was just a fading memory of hope in vain, and he was left with nothing. Just what on earth was he supposed to do? Just go and fucking kill yourself, Deku. No one fucking cares if you're gone. With a bit of luck, maybe you'll get a quirk in your next fucking life. It sounded so easy. He was on the roof of a tall building in the middle of downtown Musutafu. If he managed to pull the energy together to throw himself off the ledge, death will come as soon as he hit the ground. Maybe even before that if his heart stops from a shock-induced cardiac arrest from free-falling. But he didn't want to die. What if he somehow survived his suicide attempt? What if he really died, and there was no next life? Just an empty void of nothingness. He just didn't know how to go on from this point. A cold gust of wind blew across the rooftop. He barely registered it. What will you give for a chance? He thought that he didn't hear it, but his subconscious did. Anything. Nothing comes for free, you know. Anything. His subconscious screamed. Anything to escape this hell. Another gust of wind blew, even colder than the first. It shall be done. It was a perfectly clear, warm May day when the wind picked up. People walking along the streets would remember this unremarkable day as the one when the weather suddenly changed, seemingly out of nowhere and not by the cause of man or quirk. The blue sky suddenly morphed into a somber gray, and the little white wisps of clouds grew in size and turned ominous. The temperature plummeted, and to the confusion of those on the streets, snow began to fall from the heavens. It descended upon the city at a steady rate, reaching inches within an hour. News crews would descend upon Musutafu to report on this strange weather phenomenon. And scientific circles would go to say that they could neither draw head or tail on how snow could suddenly fall on a city completely out of season. In all of the hubbub, no one paid any attention to the rooftop of a random office building. As a teenager of barely 13 lay prone upon the concrete, the snow fell over him like a soft blanket. As the hours passed, he became buried under more than a meter of frozen water particles. His sun, hidden away by the clouds, descended below the horizon unnoticed. The snow continued to fall well into the night, and cleanup crews were called in to help clear the streets to let traffic flow. Up on that office building, the snow had built up to the point of blocking the rooftop access door. At first, nothing happened, just a deep pile of snow on a rooftop. Then, something burrowed through the snow and broke through. There were no security cameras on the roof, so no one spotted a teenager of average height, wearing the same gakurin as the one whom All Might left behind, emerge from the snow. But while the teen previously had untamed curls that were forest green with black highlights, the lights that reflected off revealed a brilliant white color, the exact same shade as the snow at his feet. The follicles have lost their curls, falling in gentle waves over the teen's face. He took a few steps through the snow and stopped. Glancing down, he stretched out a hand and made a circular sweeping motion. As if swept up by a powerful wind, all of the snow was pulled off the floor, swirled around the teen for several moments, before coalescing into his open palm as a large snowflake. The teen thrust his hand into the air, and the snowflake was thrown upwards, whereupon it exploded into a shower of sparkling crystals. The teen went over to a yellow backpack that lay innocently a few paces away, slung it over his shoulder, and headed for the staircase, closing the access door behind him with an audible click. Midoriya Izuku was worried. It was nearing midnight, and her son still hadn't come home from school. His portion of katsudon had grown cold on the dining table as she continuously paced around the living, glancing at the front door every few seconds. Inko had tried calling his mobile, but all she got each and every time was his voicemail message. It didn't help that even in the suburbs, snow began to fall. As she watched the news reports on the sudden unusual weather phenomenon, her anxiety worsened. What if her son was caught up in a villain attack that caused the snow to fall? Should she call the police and seek help? When midnight passed and still no sound of the door opening, No Izuku apologizing profusely for losing track of time, and Ko decided that she couldn't wait any longer. She picked up the phone and dialed in the police hotline. Good evening, Musutafu Police Department. How may I help you? Came a bored, disinterested voice. My name is Midoriya Izuku, and my son is missing. I need to make a report. All right, the man replied after a loud yawn. What is your son's name, age, and quirk? Midoriya Izuku, age 13, and he's quirkless. A short scribbling of a pencil on paper. Midoriya-san, in line with police protocol, I need your contact details should we require further assistance on your part. If the investigation yields any findings, we can also contact you then. Inko gave her phone number, which was followed by more scribbling. We will keep you updated. Good night, Midoriya-san. And just like that, the call ended. Inko slowly put the receiver back into its place. She shuffled over to the sofa and sat down hard. She was not blind to the horrific discrimination and abuse faced by quirkless individuals, but to actually hear the police officer on the other line behave so dismissively about her son's plight was a literal stab to her heart. The tears followed immediately. All sorts of questions raced through her mind. If it wasn't a villain attack or kidnapping, why would her son just disappear? If he had indeed run away, why would he do such a thing? As far as she knew, she never treated Izuku badly. A bit protective, maybe, but she never smothered him. She did try to support her son as best as she could, but was her best not enough? Did he decide that she was a terrible mother and run away? Her sweet Izuku wouldn't think of such things. Right, the more she thought, the deeper she spiraled. Her emotions spilled, and she wept uncontrollably. She just wanted her son home. Even if their situation will never be perfect, at least they would have each other. But she had no idea where he even was, and it tore her heart apart. Just a few meters away, beyond the front door, stood the source of Inko's pain. Izuku could hear his mother's sobs through the door. And it could have been so easy, simply step inside and announce that he was home. It would have ended his mother's pain in an instant. But he didn't. Something had changed within him. He saw no point in actually going inside to see his mother. She would not serve him well in his purpose. She would only get in the way. Slipping off his yellow backpack, he placed it by the shoe rack. Turning his back to the door, he headed towards the elevators and went down. The apartment block was next to a canal that had naturally frozen over when the snow began to fall around the city. Izuku slid down the slope towards the frozen canal and took a step onto it. The underside of his sneaker lit up as the power within him spread across the frozen water, thickening it further. Taking more steps forward, and Izuku picked up a sprint. He raced down the canal into the distance, disappearing from sight. The new day came. The sky cleared up, and the snowfall ceased. What snow that remained quickly melted in the rapidly rising temperatures, and life seemingly returned to normal. All Might began another day as the symbol of peace, blissfully unaware that he was an indirect cause of the snowfall, or of the consequences that were to come. Bakugo Katsuki just left home for school, missing the moment his parents received a tear-filled phone call from Inko that Izuku was missing. The police had called her again, asking her to come down to the station to discuss her next course of action. Katsuki would only realize something was up when homeroom started and that useless Deku was nowhere in sight. At first, he was smug, thinking that Deku had finally learned his place and was keeping himself scarce. It was only when their teacher came in and announced that Deku was missing that some of that smugness fell away. Immediately, the entire class was up in gossip. Some speculated that Deku ran away, others thought that he became a villain. Some, especially Katsuki's lackeys, believed that Deku had actually killed himself and were eyeing him with a mix of either unreadable or wary looks. Despite the pit that began to form in his stomach, Katsuki brushed it aside. It's not like anything bad happened now that Deku was gone. It was a good thing. One less pebble to get in the way of his path to being the #1 hero. He studiously ignored the sinking feeling for the rest of the day. It was long past sunset when Izuku arrived. The small island of Rishiri, just off the northern coast of Hokkaido, had a population of just over 5,000, and the landmass was mostly taken up by the mountain that bore the island's namesake and undisturbed nature, as the main human settlements were mostly concentrated in the southwest and northeast of the island. No one had any idea that Izuku was even there as he reached the foot of the mountain. Normally, novice hikers would be advised against climbing Mount Rishiri due to challenging obstacles and dangerous terrain, especially when night fell. But Izuku was unfazed. Pausing in his trek, he tested his new power. It manifested through his hand, as little bursts of snowflakes. He produced sweeping streams of snow through gentle pulls and harder pushes. It came easy, as if it had always been a part of him. He released a stream of snowflakes that swirled around him, before shooting out into the darkness. The frozen flakes of water reflected off the moonlight, creating a clear path for him to follow. Whenever he reached a steep part or an obstacle, the swirling snow simply lifted him up to a safe spot to continue his trek. The stream traveling before him suddenly stopped, before shooting downwards into a dark abyss a few meters in front. Izuku guessed there was a crevice before him, and if it weren't for his power, he would have fallen to his death. The snowflake stream pulled itself up again, and arched over to a ledge on the other side. Izuku knew what he had to do. He thrust his hands forward, releasing a rush of snow that coalesced into the beginning of a bridge. He stepped up to the structure and placed a foot onto the first step. His power turned the snow into solid ice, allowing him to step up and turn the next landing into ice. Izuku began running, his hands creating more snow while his feet did the freezing. He crossed the crevice in less than a minute, stepping onto the ledge with a great burst of snowflakes. The ledge itself was quite large, definitely big enough to comfortably build a small dwelling for himself. Heading to the middle, Izuku raised a foot and slammed it onto the ground. A massive 8-pointed snowflake made of ice blossomed from his foot, spreading to cover much of the ledge. Channeling his power into his hands, Izuku pulled it up from the ground. The mountain was rocked by a great rumbling noise as a 3-storied pagoda of ice rose from the ledge. Izuku moved around, pulling up walls and building the roofs through his hands. Little openings in the floors allowed staircases to be built, and the finial rose up from the highest pyramidal roof in a spiraling swirl of snowflakes. Letting his hands fall to his side, Izuku inspected his new home. It was fitting, extremely practical, perfect for solitary training of the mind and body. He pushed a set of doors open, leading out to the balcony. Even though it was still night time, the light of the moon presented a spectacular view of the mountainous landscape. Izuku could even see the distant lights of the southwestern human settlement, which immediately posed a problem. If he could see civilization, the people living down there could also easily see his dwelling. Izuku couldn't afford anyone discovering his presence on the mountain, so he called his power out again. A storm of snowflakes flew from his hands and surrounded the pagoda, camouflaging it into the snowy landscape. With the view shrouded, Izuku returned inside, closing the doors behind him with a wave of his hand. Sleep called, and he needed to be prepared for tomorrow. The investigation lasted for a total of 4 days. During that time, anyone who had a connection to Midoriya Izuku was questioned by the local police. With Inko's assistance, a missing person bulletin was aired on all local news channels throughout Musutafu, and posters were put up around the city. It was an emotional roller coaster for Inko. Hope had briefly sprung up the morning after she made the first call, when she opened the door to get the newspaper, only to find Izuku's backpack sitting by the shoe rack, still slightly damp. It was taken as evidence by the forensic investigators to see if any sort of clues could be extracted. But nothing was found, and it was returned to Inko by the end of the day. Each new sunrise rekindled the hope that some news about her missing son would come, only for that flame to die down again when night fell. Then came the news that she dreaded, but didn't want to fully acknowledge in her desperate attempts to stay hopeful. With no leads to go by, the police deemed Izuku's disappearance a cold case and closed the investigation, telling Inko right to her face that there was little hope of her son being found alive, and that they were extremely sorry that she had to go through such an experience. It was platitude-laden and well-intentioned, but without true meaning or sympathy. Izuku's disappearance was not the first, nor would it be last. A case will grow cold and ultimately be deemed unsolvable. To the police, it was just a slightly disheartening statistic that they would eventually get over and move on. But for Inko, it was as if the world had come to an end. The shock hit so brutally that the green-haired woman slipped into catatonia. Seeing as she had become unresponsive, the police officers simply left the apartment without a further word. They were busy, after all. They couldn't continue to sit around with a catatonic, unresponsive woman when their time could be focused on more important things. The door closed with a soft click. Absolute silence filled the apartment for 10 minutes before the tears began to fall. The dam failed, collapsing entirely. Those who lived on the same floor as the Midoriyas would hear the deafening, anguished wails of a woman who had lost her entire world. Most would simply carry on with their business, while a few felt a twinge of sympathy for their neighbor. The wailing would go on for hours, until it finally died down. One full day would pass before an elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down from the Midoriyas became concerned. Hobbling over to the Midoriya's front door, the old woman pressed the doorbell, but no response came. She tried knocking and called out Inko's name. Again, no response. The old woman tried the door, immediately discovering that it was unlocked. Letting herself in, she scanned the living room for any sign of her neighbor. At first, she found nothing, but then she heard labored breathing near the television console. Hobbling over, the old woman nearly stumbled back from fright. Lying on the floor, with saliva drooling out of her mouth and pooling over the floor, was Inko, her body twitching violently as if she was undergoing a seizure. The neighbor was immediately by Inko's side, shaking her and trying to rouse a response. But Inko never made any inkling that she was even aware of her situation, let alone realize that someone had found her. Seeing that her efforts were in vain, the elderly neighbor stumbled towards the phone and called for emergency services. An ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. The residents watched with muted curiosity as Inko was strapped to a gurney and wheeled into the vehicle by paramedics. The old woman who found her was told to come along. And when she returned later that evening to fellow neighbors expecting answers, she spilled the beans. Inko was fine physically, but her mental state had all but collapsed. She displayed negligible signs of brain activity and was effectively a vegetable. Last the old woman knew, Inko had been transferred to a high-dependency room in the hospital's psychiatric ward for an indeterminable length of stay. It was a grim ending to a debacle that everyone had pity for, but ultimately decided that it was not worth losing sleep over. Everyone moved on, putting the reminder of an empty apartment unit out of their minds as they continued with their lives. Many miles to the north, in a 3-storied pagoda made of ice upon a ledge of Mount Rishiri, Izuku sat in quiet meditation, unaware that his mother had been institutionalized with negligible chances of ever being released. Not that he would have cared. It wouldn't serve him well in his purpose. It would have simply gotten in his way. Izuku kept his breathing steady and his mind clear. His power encompassed the room, manifesting as snowflakes gently falling around him. In order for him to properly use his power, he had to let go of the trauma. Almost 10 years of abuse, ostracization, injury and pain had to be confronted and then released from his mind and soul. It was not easy. One does not simply forget about trauma within a day or two, but the dulling his emotions certainly helped. The memories of all that pain and suffering surfaced one after another, and Izuku attacked each and every one without mercy. His power grew stronger, the snowfall gradually increasing with each mental attack. Within minutes, a blizzard had formed, the howling wind whipping the snow around the room at terrifying speeds. Despite that, Izuku remained perfectly still, breathing even and eyes closed. When the blizzard became a whiteout, the wind reaching deafening decibels, Izuku's eyes flashed open and he let go. All of the snow shot towards the doors, forcing them open as it billowed out into the mountain. The air was once again still, silent save for Izuku's breathing. He sighed softly. He knew that the memories will come back again. It was only a matter of time. His training was far from over. Getting up from the floor, Izuku headed downstairs and stepped out of the pagoda. Crossing the bridge over the crevice, he headed for a cave that he discovered 2 days prior. Out of sight from potential hikers or mountain climbers, he began a new session of physical training to build up his strength and power. Izuku knew his power was strong, but he knew that there will always be someone stronger than him. If he wanted to fulfill his purpose, he needed to surpass them. He needed to become unstoppable, where not even the greatest heroes or villains will be able to get in his way. Each session lasted about 3 hours. As he had no means of strength equipment or free weights, Izuku used the natural material around him instead. Rocks and boulders were used to train every muscle group in his body, and also served as good target practice for him to use his power on. In the 4 days that he had been blessed with his power, he was learning everything that he could do with it. He already knew he could build structures with it, and any snow and ice reacted in kind to his will. He could create his own snow and ice, and now all that was left to do was turn this ability into tactical maneuvers. It was going to be hard work. He was still scrawny, and his power still raw. All Izuku knew was that he had 2 years to make it work, and by the heavens' will, he was going to make it work. 2 years passed. Inko was still institutionalized, showing no signs of improvement or recovery despite the professional's best attempts. Katsuki's relationship with his parents had gone downhill. When he displayed no concern for Inko or Izuku even after everything had happened, his mother lashed out at him, tearing him a new one over his callousness, which only reinforced Katsuki's hatred for Izuku. He continued to push all the blame onto the missing teen, for making his lackeys increasingly distant from him, for making him become the target of the Aldera gossip mill, for some fucking extra to scrawl the word murderer on his desk with a permanent marker, for making the teachers begin looking upon him with suspicion. For fucking everything. Katsuki wanted to explode something. Anything. Heck, he'll probably blow up the entire world just to make himself feel better. At least that fucking Deku will be permanently gone if that were to happen. Even then, he continued to ignore the sinking feeling in his chest, steadily growing worse with time. Meanwhile, All Might continued on with blissful ignorance. Sure, he did catch the tail end of a missing persons report on the local news 2 years prior, but it had already ended by the time he realized what it was. So the man simply pushed it out of his mind, oblivious to the fact that the report was about the quirkless child whose dream he had callously destroyed on that rooftop, and that report was the final one that was ever aired, before the investigation into the missing child was subsequently closed by the police. Last but not least, Izuku was ready. After 2 years, he had grown. Unfortunately, his genes meant that his height wasn't going to increase exponentially anymore, but he was definitely no longer the scrawny kid that he started out as. Packed with muscle that stretched the robe he made for himself with his ice, the rocks and boulders he used to struggle with now felt nothing more than paperweight. His quirk has also evolved from merely be able to manipulate ice and snow. Beyond mastering numerous attack and defense maneuvers, Izuku learned how to fly by channeling his power into wings, and using his ice to form weapons that stood strong against the hardest rock. So far, he was able to make daggers, swords, and axes that could easily kill a man with one attack. He had the arsenal to back him up. And as he woke up to the new day that would bring in the next milestone of his journey, he reflected upon his purpose, the single goal that drove him to this point and had him put everything into for the past 2 years. For 9 years, no one saved him. His former self cried desperately for a hero, but no one came. He never forgot how society ignored him at best, and scorned him at worst. And he knew that he was not the only one. Just how many quirkless people out there had no one to aid them in their time of need? Izuku didn't know the exact statistics, but it was abundantly clear that there were too many to count. Who was going to be their hero, when the establishment clearly thought of them as inferior and nothing more than a waste of space and oxygen? That was his purpose. He may have lost his emotions that fateful day 2 years prior, but that didn't mean that Izuku was going to sit back and let the world burn. He'll be a hero to those who need him, nothing more and nothing less. He won't aim for frivolous glory, camera flashes, and screaming fans. Those heroes who are in it simply for the fame do not deserve the title. He will not be like them. He will simply do his job, save as many people as he can, and carry on until he is unable to do so anymore. Society has begun its slow festering from every level. The least he could do was begin the treatment. Izuku stepped out onto the balcony and parted the snow shrouding the pagoda with a sweep of his hands. As the morning sun beamed upon the ice, Izuku took several steps back, rushed up towards the railing, and threw himself off. Before gravity could take its hold on him, Izuku let his wings unfurl, and he shot away at supersonic speeds from the mountain towards the Hokkaido mainland. The journey back to Musutafu took about 45 minutes. Touching down in a dark alley not too far away from the gates of Yui, Izuku turned his robe into a more unassuming set of long-sleeved shirt and slacks. Musutafu really didn't change all that much in the 2 years he had gone, as if they had completely forgotten about him and carried on with their lives. Izuku wasn't surprised, to be frank, because seriously, who would give a shit if a quirkless teenager disappeared off the face of the earth? No one would, and the government would be pleased. Less resources to spend on a defect, they would likely think. In fact, he wouldn't put it past the government to strike him off the citizens' registrar on the presumption that he was dead. Crossing the road, Izuku joined the flow of excited hopefuls passing through the gates. The written examination was up first, before the practical assessment later in the afternoon. It took a bit of navigation to find the classroom where he was designated to take the written portion, slipping inside without being noticed. The exam was not due to start for another 20 minutes, more candidates streaming, and as time passed, Izuku drummed his fingers against the desk, waiting for something to happen when the door opened again. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Was that Katsuki? Same spiky blonde hair, blood-red irises, permanent scowl ... Yep, that was indeed Katsuki. Izuku silently watched as his former childhood friend trudged up to his seat 2 rows in front of him. Katsuki didn't really look all that different, other than appearing a bit taller and more muscular than as a 13-year-old. But the one major difference that Izuku noticed right away were the dark circles underneath his nemesis' eyes. Immediately, Izuku's mind began contemplating. Something must have affected Katsuki a great deal if he was losing sleep. But surely it wasn't his disappearance, right? Just go and fucking kill yourself, Deku. No one fucking cares if you're gone. With a bit of luck, maybe you'll get a quirk in your next fucking life. Izuku shook his head. Of course not. Why would Katsuki lose sleep over his disappearance if he suicide baited him in the first place? Something else must have happened, but Izuku couldn't bring himself to care. He was just glad that his former bully was made to suffer for a while. The examination minder, the pro-hero Snipe of all people, entered the room 5 minutes later. Immediately, all conversation ceased. Snipe addressed the room with a prominent Texan accent, explaining the instructions and distributing the assessment papers. They were then allowed to begin writing. Izuku breezed through the paper with relative ease, finishing up in a good hour of the 2-hour time allocation. He spent the remaining hour checking through his answers, before an alarm rang, signaling the end of the written assessment. The papers were collected, and Snipe dismissed the candidates. He waited for Katsuki to leave the room before getting up himself. Izuku headed for the cafeteria where he could sate his growling stomach. There were already long queues by the time he arrived, so there was nothing to be done other than to wait. As he inched forward, Izuku idly listened to the conversations happening around him. Some were discussing the written assessment, others on the practical assessment later on. He picked up snatches of bemoaning over difficult questions, and concerns about what they will face later on. At one point, Izuku thought he heard someone predict that they will be fighting the Yui staff who will be masquerading as villains for the practical assessment. He had to admit that that concept would be more inclusive towards non-combative quirks than, say, giant robots or something. When he reached his turn, Izuku ordered a large bowl of katsudon and an iced milk tea. His order came out, hot off the kitchen, in less than 5 minutes. Now came the problem of actually finding a seat. With hundreds of candidates taking part in the practical assessment in the coming hours, the entire cafeteria was virtually packed. Every table was more or less occupied, and Izuku didn't fancy sitting with strangers. He had no choice but to wander around the cafeteria until someone got their butts off a table so that he could claim it for himself. It would take 10 minutes, but one 2-seater table by the window did open up. Izuku immediately beelined for the table and just put his tray down when footsteps approached. Hey, do you mind sharing? Everywhere else is taken. Izuku glanced down. There were 2 boys, both about average height. One had styled orange-tinted blonde hair with a black lightning bolt streaking across his left side fringe. His irises matched in color, and he had small eyebrows. The second had bright red hair styled upwards in spikes. He had a small scar under his eye, and his teeth were incredibly sharp, almost like a shark. Now, Izuku might not have emotions anymore, but he still had manners. Okay. The boys immediately relaxed. Izuku and these 2 other candidates sat down, gave thanks and dug into their lunches. Admittedly, Izuku felt a little uncertain sharing close quarters with complete strangers. He supposed living in isolation for 2 years certainly had a part in that. The blonde and redhead began chatting, Izuku maintaining his silence, though his ears discreetly listened. One of them complained about the difficulty of the written assessment, and the other tried to hype him up. The conversation then shifted to the practical component, the pair speculating about what they were going to face later. They shared multiple possibilities, all of which Izuku had already heard while waiting in line for his food. The blonde then groaned, complaining about he and the redhead were not in the same testing zones where they could have probably teamed up or something. Izuku finished up his lunch, without telling his other table occupants. He got up and went to return his tray. The briefing was in 20 minutes, best he start moving. Hey HEYYYY. Welcome to the briefing for the UE practical entrance exam. Can I get a loud yeah? Dead silence. Izuku wondered if Present Mike could even read the atmosphere in the auditorium. This was not some talk show, or even his radio show over the air. This was a large hall filled with more or less nervous teenagers whose dreams and futures hung in the balance. Izuku may be calm, but even he could see the tension in the air. Of course, no one was going to scream yeah on the top of their lungs when their nerves were all jumbled up. Wow, tough crowd, aren't you? You don't say, Izuku thought to himself, as Present Mike continued. Anyways, now with that out of the way, let's get rolling, yeah. The silence continued. Each and every one of you here are potential heroes, and it is a hero's duty to take down villains. For the practical assessment, you will be up against 4 different types of robots. Present Mike swung a hand towards the screen behind him. It lit up, displaying the silhouettes of the 4 robots. Each robot carries a different number of points, 1 to 3, and it is your job to take down as many as you can within the stipulated time limit of 15 minutes. Don't forget, the more points you score, the better your chances of getting in. The tension thickened, but a sense of determination quickly formed too. Meanwhile, Izuku waited for the other shoe to drop. Excuse me. All eyes turned to several rows behind Izuku. A bespectacled teenage boy, about the same height as Izuku and just as muscular, shot up from his seat. You did not tell us about the 4th robot. Aren't the staff of UE supposed to be extremely thorough in their presentations? Rude much. Izuku frowned. He didn't even raise his hand. Yes, I was just about to get to that, listener. Thank you for the reminder. Present Mike replied back with finger guns, which Izuku couldn't be sure if the voice hero was being sarcastic, oblivious, or just rolling with it. The 4th robot, as candidate 419 pointed out, is what we call the 0-pointer. Basically, this robot is worthless to everyone here today, and should not be tackled. And that, listeners, brings me to the end of the briefing. Remember, any unheroic actions such as attacking other candidates will see you being immediately disqualified from the exam. The staff will be watching, so don't try anything funny, yeah. Now get out there and break a leg, everyone. Please don't say that. Someone might actually break a leg or 2, Izuku thought as he got up from his seat and joined the flow of students leaving the auditorium for the changing rooms. Izuku stood before the massive gates keeping him and the others out from the fake city that loomed behind it. He ignored the conversations taking place among the other candidates, though he couldn't help but hear a somewhat familiar voice berating someone over their perceived attempts to distract their fellow candidate. Was it that same bespectacled loudmouth who rudely interrupted Present Mike during the briefing? He honestly couldn't bring himself to care. The gates began rumbling, and as they slowly opened, Izuku prepared himself. Over the air, Present Mike screamed, "Start!" Izuku's wings burst to life, and he shot into the fake city, while his fellow candidates stood around looking quite dumb. Hey, why are you all doing? There's no countdown in real life. Be like that snowy listener. Get moving before all the points are gone. As the rest of the candidates pushed and shoved one another to get into the fake city, Izuku was already honing in on his first targets. A trio of one-pointers came flying out from an alley and intercepted his path. Izuku shot out 3 large icicles. All punched through the robots, causing them to explode. 3 points. Settling down onto the road, Izuku scoped out his next targets. A line of 3-pointers came rolling down the tarmac. Rocket launchers moving into position, aiming at Izuku. He immediately placed a hand onto the tarmac and sent fast-moving ice straight towards the robots. Large spikes shot up from the trail, impaling through the robots and causing them to explode. Just like that, another 15 points, total at 18. Izuku took to the air again, looking for more targets. By this point, other candidates have caught up with him and were searching for their own targets to boost their chances. Izuku sees another candidate, a teenager with a large belt around their waist. They had fired an enormous laser through a 2-pointer when 3 1-pointers came hurtling towards them from behind. Izuku immediately shot down towards the candidate, grabbed them and dove out of the way, in the process conjuring a wave of ice that struck the robots down. 21 points. The team then realized what had happened. Merci beaucoup, monsieur. I did not expect to be ambushed. Be more aware of your surroundings, Izuku said, setting the team down before taking flight again. Izuku would spend the next 10 minutes taking down 4 more 1-pointers, 6 2-pointers and 5 3-pointers, bumping his score up to 52. In between, if he spotted someone in need or about to be attacked, he would swoop in to get them out of harm's way. At the same time, he didn't know that the staff were assessing the candidates not just on the number of villains points they accumulated. Being a hero wasn't all about taking down villains. Rescuing innocent civilians and getting them to safety was also part of the criteria. Therefore, Izuku's score continued rising without him realizing, bumping up to 73, 3 points for every person he rescued. Kicking away a 2-pointer, Izuku settled back on the ground, looking for more targets. Strangely, the city blocks seemed devoid of robotic activity, as if all the robots have mysteriously disappeared from a wave of a magic wand. Then came a loud crashing sound, and a strong rumbling that shook the ground like an earthquake. The screams immediately followed. Izuku looked down the road and immediately understood. A gargantuan robot, taller than the city blocks around it, came rumbling towards them. A massive 0 was painted on the front, and as it inched towards the candidates, its metal appendages smashed through glass, steel, and concrete, creating massive downpours of rubble that quickly coated the road in clouds of dust. Izuku could hear the other candidates booking it for their lives, and he couldn't really blame them. After all, didn't Present Mike say that there was no point trying to take down the 0-pointer? However, it seemed that a reason to do so presented itself to him. Hey, Izuku turned to the strange noises. About several meters ahead of him, someone lay trapped under a pile of twisted rubble. He squinted his eyes. Was that one of the boys who sat at the same lunch table as him? The blonde had 2 thumbs up, a blank look in his eyes and a goofy grin as drool slipped out of his mouth. He wasn't doing anything other than making those strange noises, and the 0-pointer was advancing upon him. Why wasn't he getting out? Was he unable to? Izuku was no neurologist, but he suspected that something must have happened to the blonde's brain to leave him in this stupefied state. Another rumbling noise jolted him out of his thoughts. No more dilly-dallying. He had to save an innocent life before it was brutally cut short. Izuku raced towards the advancing 0-pointer, catching the attention of the remaining candidates who hadn't fled by this point. His power pooling in his hands, he slammed them into the robot's metal plating. His ice penetrated deep into the robot, spreading all over in a matter of seconds. This was a move that he called permanent freezing. Unlike the typical act of encasing a target in ice, this turns the target into literal ice. It didn't matter if it was organic or inorganic matter, solid ice is what they become. It took a full minute for the robot to become a mountain of ice, stopped in its tracks. Izuku raised a leg, and with a loud shout, swung his foot into the robot. Those who witnessed the entire scene would remember the moment when a massive shockwave raced through the fake city at lightning speed. The 0-pointer was completely atomized into tiny sparkling icy particles that were flung in all directions. Some were thrown up into the air and rained down upon the road in a beautiful shower. It was all over in seconds, and silence followed. Time's up, listeners. That's all you have, and thank you for taking part in the UE entrance exam. Present Mike's echoing voice knocked the stunned candidates back into reality. Brushing off the ice from his tracksuit, Izuku headed over to the pile of rubble that trapped the blonde, and began pushing and hauling the pieces off to free him. Carefully picking the teen up in a bridle carry so as to not aggravate any possible injuries, Izuku walked back towards the other candidate. Well done, everyone. You all did well, came an elderly voice. Izuku inwardly sighed in relief. Recovery girl had arrived. The elderly medi-heroine was going around, healing up the injuries sustained by the candidates and giving them gummies to replenish the energy lost from the use of her quirk. Izuku approached her. Recovery girl, he needs your help. She turned to Izuku. Goodness me. What happened to him? I don't know. I think there might be something up with his brain. And he was trapped under a pile of rubble earlier when the zero-pointer was approaching. The Medi heroine muttered to herself, I swear to everything that is holy that I will wring Nezu's neck if it is the last thing I do. She returned to Izuku. Let me have a look, dearie. Izuku set the blonde down, allowing Recovery Girl to examine him. Just an expected side effect of having an electricity emitter quirk. Just a kiss and plenty of rest should suffice. She planted a kiss on the teen's forehead. And immediately the goofy grin shifted back into a neutral line and his eyes fluttered shut. She then tapped the speaker of the pink headset she wore. We have a casualty in ground beta. Bring a stretcher immediately. She then turned to Izuku. Did you get hurt anywhere yourself, dear? Not that I am aware of. Just a quick kiss then, to be safe. Recovery Girl administered the kiss to Izuku's hand. But the teen didn't feel anything happen. Nonetheless, the Medi heroine gave him a couple of gummies. At that same moment, 2 medical hoverbots rolled into ground beta carrying a stretcher. Izuku helped her place the blonde onto the stretcher and saw them off with a nod of thanks from the Medi heroine. There was nothing else to be done. It was time to return home. There were very few things in life that intrigued Nezu, principal of Yui High School. Midoriya Izuku was one of them. Before the start of every new school year, Nezu and his staff would comb through the backgrounds of every single candidate who registered for the entrance exam to ensure that no rotten eggs managed to weasel their way in. Midoriya Izuku could have easily been just another face in the crowd of hero hopefuls, but Hound Dog noticed some interesting information in young Midoriya's file, and decided that it was worth Nezu's attention. Nezu prided himself in knowing a lot of things, far more than most humans could ever conceive, but young Midoriya's file, admittedly, knocked him off kilter for a moment. The first thing that the Chimera noticed was that Midoriya Izuku shared the name of a quirkless teenager that went missing 2 years prior. Now, Nezu sympathized with the quirkless population. Coming from less than ideal circumstances himself, he would try everything and anything to help make the lives of the quirkless even a little better. He even made Yui the first heroic school in the country to accept quirkless students, something the others have yet to even accommodate. So when he heard that a quirkless teenager had gone missing, Nezu had Yui join forces with the Musutafu police to look for the poor kid and return him home. However, the investigation was closed after 4 days, thus ending the school's involvement. But unlike virtually everyone else, Nezu never forgot the name Midoriya Izuku, especially when he heard through the grapevine that the boy's mother was institutionalized as a result of a complete mental collapse following the closure of the investigation. So when the exact same name appeared in the folder in the months before the entrance exam, Nezu knew that something was amiss. The chances of 2 individuals sharing the same first name and surname were next to none in Japan. Furthermore, Nezu remembered from the investigation that the boy had short, curly green hair with matching emerald irises. The attached photo showed a boy with long white hair that was far less curly, and his irises were a sharp, icy blue. And while Nezu could attribute the changes in facial structure to developmental growth, the changes seemed far too stark for 2 years. Also, Midoriya from 2 years prior was quirkless. This Midoriya who took part in the entrance exam displayed a versatile cryokinetic quirk that could have only been pulled off with years of training under the belt. 2 possibilities presented themselves to Nezu. One was that young Midoriya's quirk came in late, and he disappeared to train it up in preparation for the entrance exam. 2 was that someone had stolen the boy's identity for reasons undetermined. Nezu hoped that it was the first possibility, but questions still remained unanswered. Some things weren't adding up here, and he was determined to find out. He did always love a good mystery, after all. Tell me, why exactly am I here for? Aizawa Shouta, a bedraggled man with messy, unkempt black hair, stubble and extremely unhealthy-looking eye bags, was not one for pleasantries or platitudes. He was very logic-driven, a man who does not waste time and goes straight into business. So when Principal Nezu called him to his office in the middle of his afternoon nap, he wasn't going to beat around the bush. The faster this was over with, the faster he could return to his sleeping bag. I would like to discuss with you about candidate 589. Namely one Midoriya Izuku, Nezu replied, steeping his paws together. Aizawa sighed. He knew this was going to be a headache in the making. What about him? I've noticed several potentially concerning discrepancies in his file. The Chimera began. Are you aware that he shares the same name as the quirkless teenager from Aldera Middle School who disappeared 2 years ago? Vaguely. So we're dealing with an alleged identity thief. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Smart deduction. Something that came to my mind too, Nezu replied brightly. However, I am banking on the other possibility that these 2 are actually the same person, merely that young Midoriya's quirk came in late. And why does this concern you, if that is the case? There is a period of 2 years where Midoriya is unaccounted for, Nezu replied. In that time, no one knew where he was, but he evidently was around civilization quite a bit, since he completed online education courses that technically allowed him to sign up for the Yui entrance exam in the first place. But it still begs the question, why did he disappear? Why did he run away from home and in the process cause his mother to suffer a complete mental collapse? Even Aizawa had to admit that those were some good questions. Furthermore, young Midoriya did extraordinarily well in the entrance exam. He came in second for the written portion, and scored a total of 98 points in the practical portion, the highest of the cohort. There it was. The beginnings of a headache gnawed at Aizawa's brain. It was all but guaranteed that Midoriya Izuku was going to be in his class come the new school term, which is why I would like you to join me in my search for answers. Nezu chirped. After all, we can't just let a top scorer in without finding out his true intentions. Aizawa really wanted to argue. Really he did. But he knew that it was pointless against the sadistic chimera that was Nezu. He did have a question though. Where do we find him, then? I had to do a little bit of digging myself, Nezu explained. The places where I picked up his digital footprint were spread out all over the country. But for a year after his disappearance, his locations seemed to center around Hokkaido and the northernmost prefectures of Honshu. Also, do you remember that on the day before Midoriya's disappearance was officially made, there was an unusual snowfall over Musutafu? Aizawa remembered. All right. He had to take the day off because the snow was making it dangerous to move about, alongside the general confusion since it was May when the snow fell from the heavens. I might have written it off as a one-time anomaly, but in the process of my research, I found an article from a small Sapporo newspaper over how the residents of Rishiri Island were reporting strange weather activity over the mountain that bears the island's name, particularly in the summer months over the past 2 years. Surely that can't be just a mere coincidence, Aizawa would be inclined to agree. Another question came to mind. If Midoriya was leaving digital footprints around, why hasn't anyone notified the police about his reappearance? A question that yields no easy answers, Nezu replied cryptically, but I will say that when it comes to the quirkless, even the police will stop giving a fuck after a while. Aizawa sighed. Despite his reputation as being so logic-driven that he was quite possibly emotionally stunted, he knew full well the difficult existence quirkless individuals almost always endure before deciding that life was too much of a burden. Even as a pro-hero, Aizawa could understand the disadvantages faced by the quirkless. He might have a quirk, but he fought villains effectively without one since all it did was temporarily erase the target's quirk. So you're going to put the problem child in my class. I suppose we're going to go look for him. Right on the nose, Aizawa-kun. Nezu chirped. In fact, you should go home and pack, for we are leaving first thing in the morning tomorrow. The eternally tired man sighed again. Izuku knew that they were coming. He had known this from the very moment that he registered for the Yui entrance exam. He knew that one day, any time after the conclusion of the exam, that someone, or some people, from Yui were going to seek him out. It was only a matter of time. He had to prepare for the relentless questioning that was all but certain to come. But he won't be cowed. Aizawa and Nezu spent the next 4 days going up north to Rishiri Island, taking the Shinkansen to Hakodate, a short flight up to Wakanai, and then a ferry towards Rishiri. They stayed in town for one night, before beginning their trek up the mountain. Well, Aizawa did. Nezu took up space within the eternally tired man's capture weapon and essentially free-rode Aizawa for most of the hike. The pair had expected the journey to be quite daunting, especially if they faced any cliffs, crevices, or rock faces that would require experienced mountain climbing gear to overcome. But strangely, it was mostly smooth sailing. Sure, there were some steep inclines, but nothing that Aizawa couldn't handle. In fact, Nezu deduced that someone must have altered the mountain's landscape to make their trek easier. Almost as if someone was expecting them. Took you long enough. Aizawa looked forward, and Nezu popped up from the capture scarf. Before them, standing in front of a bridge made of ice that spanned across a deep crevice, was Midoriya Izuku. His white hair was down, and he dressed in an off-shoulder robe with 2 slits running parallel to a pair of skin-tight pants. A pair of boots with a large snowflake over each covered his feet, and from his back, a long flowing cape, split in 2, fell over the snow-covered ground towards the base of the bridge. Midoriya Izuku, Nezu chirped. It's so good to meet you in person. The team merely nodded, expression never changing. I know you have questions, so let's not delay the inevitable. Izuku turned on his heel and headed for the bridge. Nezu hopped out of Aizawa's capture weapon and followed suit, making sure to keep a safe distance so as to not accidentally step on Izuku's cape. Crossing the crevice, Chimera and Eternally Tired Hobo were greeted by a 3-storied pagoda made entirely up of ice. Nezu's beady eyes sparkled in awe, while Aizawa had to admit that it did look impressive. I presume you made this all by yourself, Midoriya-kun? Asked the mammal. Yes, the teen replied shortly, before swinging his arms out. The front doors opened on their accord, granting them entry. Nezu was once again impressed. The interior was the definition of Spartan, with only a large frozen 3-tiered fountain in the middle of the room. A staircase framed the fountain, leading to the upper floors. Follow me. They went up to the second floor, which was completely barren. Izuku waved a hand, sending out 3 streams of snowflakes that created 3 chairs in the middle of the room. Have a seat." The trio took their respective places. "Ask away." Nezu did not beat around the bush. "Why did you disappear for 2 years?" "To train my power," Izuku replied simply. "Are you aware that your disappearance caused your mother to have a complete mental collapse?" Nezu continued. "She's currently a long-term resident of Musutafu General Hospital's psychiatric ward." "Really?" Izuku quirked an eyebrow, but didn't really look all that surprised, or even affected by the news. What a pity. Even Aizawa, as emotionally stunted as he was incredibly taken aback by the cold reply. "So you don't care that your mother is effectively a vegetable with little chance of recovery?" "Aizawa-kun, please," Nezu chided. Izuku leaned forward, expression unreadable. "Listen, Aizawa-san, or should I say underground hero Eraserhead." It took a lot on Aizawa's part to not flinch at the teen's knowledge of his pro-hero identity. "I do find it regrettable that Inko suffered such a horrible fate because of my disappearance, but I am unable to really feel much for her plight, even if I wanted to." "What do you mean, Midoriya-kun?" asked Nezu. "Nothing comes for free," Izuku replied. "I got my power, but at a great cost. I no longer have the capability to feel emotion or empathize with anyone. If you want to be poetic, you could say that I have become a literal Ice King." Nezu nodded in understanding, but it was time to continue forward. "How were you able to remain undetected for 2 years? I have evidence to show that you have gone down to human civilization multiple times to complete the online courses that allowed you to register for the UE entrance exam." Izuku leaned back into his seat. "It's really amazing, Nezu-san, just how quick this society is willing to sweep things under the rug when it comes to the quirkless. It could have been easy. A sharp-eyed and minded individual could have seen my online activity, connected it to my missing persons case, and informed the authorities. But no one did, or chose not to, if you want the more likely scenario. I simply took advantage of this damning flaw. But even then I knew it was only a matter of time before someone came. I have to praise you at least, Nezu-san, for not being like most humans and actually using your intellectual abilities to seek answers. The Chimera would have preened, but now wasn't the time. Do you have any further questions? How did you get your cryokinetic powers, if you don't mind sating my curiosity?" asked Nezu. "Truly strange, that fateful day." Izuku leaned back, staring off into the distance. "A pro-hero told me that I couldn't become a hero myself because I was quirkless. He chose to ignore the look shared by the Chimera and Aizawa. He left me on a rooftop, my dream in pieces at my feet. I was left with nothing. There was no reason for me to carry on. And yet, despite my grief, I heard a voice, and it offered me my power. The snow fell, and I was gifted in exchange for my emotions." Now, Aizawa and Nezu were never followers of any particular religion, but their curiosity was definitely piqued. "Did you see who or what spoke to you?" the Chimera asked. "No," Izuku shook his head. "Whoever or whatever they were, I only heard their voice. I'm afraid I do not have any other information to tell you." "No trouble," Nezu beamed. "Also, I believe that we have spoken for quite a bit now. We're also here to deliver your results from the entrance exam. You came in second overall for the written portion. And as for the practical, you scored 54 villain points and 44 rescue points, bringing the total to 98 points. Congratulations, Midoriya Izuku. You are our best performing candidate for this year." "So I got in then?" Izuku asked rhetorically. "Absolutely," Nezu beamed. "You'll be in class 1 when term starts. And as a matter of fact, Aizawa here will be your homeroom teacher." Izuku turned towards the eternally tired man. "I'll be in your care then, Aizawa-sensei." Aizawa tried his best to not literally age from exasperation. "If anything, he'll be seeking some sort of care when term starts, not Izuku. If there is nothing else, I will see you both out." "Thank you for having us, Izuku-kun," Nezu chirped. "I have to say that this was quite the enlightening conversation." Izuku nodded silently. He saw them down to the first floor, and once they had stepped out back into the mountain, he shut the doors behind them. This time, Nezu didn't hop back into Aizawa's capture weapon. "I have to say, Midoriya-kun is a really interesting person. More like another problem child." Aizawa groaned as they headed for the bridge. "Oh, don't worry too much, Aizawa-kun." Nezu waved a paw dismissively. "I'm sure that Midoriya-kun will exercise restraint when needed. As hindsight will say it, famous last words." The day term began came with absolutely no fanfare. Izuku put on the school uniform sent over by Nezu and flew back to Musutafu, landing in the exact same alleyway he'd used during the day of the entrance exam, unseen by the passing citizens. With no one any the wiser, he slipped out into the morning sun and joined the flow of new and returning students passing through the gates and heading up towards the towering twin buildings that was Yui. Amidst the sea of students, Izuku was a faceless ghost. No one paid him any attention as he passed, and he entered the building undisturbed. It took 15 minutes for Izuku to find his classroom, coming upon a towering door with one painted on it in red. At least Yui had the foresight to include size-related quirks. He gripped the handle and slid the door open. Immediately, a great cacophony of noise assaulted his ears. It was evident that he was among the last to arrive. Virtually every seat was already occupied by his new classmates, save for one in between a midget with purple balls for hair and Izuku sighed. At the back of his mind, he'd already expected this, but to actually see him in the same class that he will be in for the next 3 years did nothing to improve his mood. As it was, the person in question was in the midst of a heated argument with that extremely rude bespectacled robot who interrupted Present Mike during the briefing. Get your feet off the desk at once. It's extremely disrespectful to those who used it before you. Why the fuck should I listen to you? 4 eyes. I will do whatever the fuck I want. Even after 2 years, Bakugo has not changed a bit, Izuku thought to himself. He took a moment to recalibrate his thoughts and accept that this was how things were going to be for the foreseeable future. Furthermore, he had trained for 2 years, and he had power now. He will not let any bad memories impede him. Izuku took a step into the classroom when he heard movement behind him. Turning around, he raised an eyebrow. A giant yellow caterpillar, stepping away from the classroom. Izuku knelt down before the strange object and poked it. When it did not move, he poked it several more times. Please stop it. Izuku immediately recognized the tired voice, Aizawa-sensei. A sigh followed. A zipper was pulled down part of the way, revealing the face of the hobo that was Aizawa Shouta. Please carry me into the room, but do so as quietly as possible. Despite the strange request, Izuku complied. Picking up the eternally tired hobo, he re-entered the classroom, with none of his new classmates any the wiser. Izuku gently placed Aizawa at the teacher's lectern, and stood by his side, waiting for something to happen. As it was, it took exactly 5 minutes for someone to notice him. Oh, a girl with pink skin and hair, horns poking out of the locks, perked up. Are you new? What's your name? Izuku didn't reply, allowing Aizawa to announce his presence. If making friends is your intention, you do not belong in the heroics course. It was only then did the rest of the class realize that the hobo was actually standing there. With the exception of him, Aizawa gestured to Izuku. It took the rest of you 5 minutes to notice that there was someone standing here. In that time, you and many other innocent people would have died from your failure to pay attention to your surroundings and overall inaction. No one knew what to say in response. Aizawa fully emerged from his sleeping bag, bent down behind the lectern, and pulled out 20 pairs of gym uniforms. Take these and head out to the training grounds. If you're not there within 15 minutes, you will get detention. Aizawa stepped off the lectern, and Izuku grabbed his uniform. Both very quickly realized that no one else had moved. Do you lot really want attention? That got everyone else moving, even though Izuku was already out through the door. Izuku got changed much faster than the other boys, and arrived at the training grounds first. Aizawa was already waiting. And as Izuku approached, the Ice King caught the brief look of approval in his teacher's seemingly bored eyes. Together, they waited in complete silence for the rest of Wanna to show up. They came in groups, most chatting with one another. Some came alone and in silence. Finally, all 20 students had gathered before Aizawa. 13 minutes and 49 seconds, the hobo drawled, clearly unimpressed, cutting it really close, I must say. A petite girl with a brown-colored bob raised her hand. Aizawa-sensei, aren't we supposed to attend the opening ceremony and our sessions with the guidance counselor? You do not have time for meaningless platitudes. Aizawa shook his head. Time is precious, and we have wasted enough as it is. Bakugo Katsuki, come forward. The scowling blonde stomped towards the man. What was your record for a softball throw in middle school? Aizawa asked. 42 meters, Katsuki spat. Aizawa chose to ignore the rude tone for now. Use your quirk, or whatever. Just don't step out of the circle. He tossed the Tina softball and stepped back. Katsuki didn't give anyone time to prepare. With one loud, hate-filled die, he launched the ball out into the air with one powered explosion. The shockwave rippled the ground, causing many of the students to lose their balance. From a tracking device, Aizawa recorded the distance and showed it to his class. 752.6 meters. On its own, it was impressive. Holy shit, that is far. That's fucking insane. Très magnifique, isn't it? The same pink-skinned girl from earlier squealed. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun. Izuku could pinpoint the exact moment that the temperature plummeted, and it wasn't because of him. So much fun. Whatever excitement there was died instantly. Despite looking like he hadn't slept in centuries, Aizawa's eyes looked absolutely feral. Is that all you think this is? Fun? The pink-skinned girl realized she must have said something wrong. Heroics is no game. There is no room for fooling or joking around. People can get hurt or even die if you don't take things seriously. And right now, most, if not all of you do not have the right mindset to be a hero. The students looked mutinous, except for Izuku, who was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The one who comes last in this assessment test will be expelled from Yui. There it was, and cue the explosion of indignation. What the fuck? That's so unfair. You can't do that. Aizawa remained unfazed. You will find that I have every right to do so. Principal Nezu gave every teaching staff the power to expel or transfer a student between courses as they see fit. Last year, I expelled my entire class because not only did they not take things seriously, they thought they had the right to be in the heroics course because of their quirks. Those mindsets are not only wrong, they will almost certainly lead to your death and the senseless killing of others. So either you shape up, or you're out. Silence followed. Uraraka Achako, you're next. It was tough, and the suffocating atmosphere certainly didn't help. Nobody wanted to be expelled and see their dreams of going pro reduced to nothing. Whatever naivety from earlier had completely evaporated. There was no room for playing around. One strike was all that was needed to get the boot. Izuku gave his all, shifting his quirk and body to suit the nature of the tests. Long jump, 50-meter sprint and endurance run. His wings would suffice. Side steps, his ice bolstered his muscle strength. The rest of the tests required pure body work and muscle, but Izuku pushed through with relentless rigor. Finally, near the close of the entire program, those who hadn't already done their softball throw were called up. Izuku was the last. And that proved to be an event entirely on its own. Midoriya Izuku, you're up, said Aizawa. The white-haired teen hadn't even taken a full step forward when someone screamed, DKU. Izuku, to his credit, didn't even blink. Ah, nice to see you again, Kaken. It was almost comical, seeing the myriad of emotions flash across Katsuki's face as the source of his torment over the past 2 years suddenly reappeared before him. What was not as comical was the murderous intent that followed. What the fuck do you think you're doing here, you worthless piece of shit? The explosions came. The other students fell back and Aizawa was about to intervene when the sound of crackling ice filled the air. Before Katsuki knew it, he had been encased up to his neck in ice. His eyes bulged from the sudden drop in temperature, and despite his struggles, his hands were frozen, rendering his own quirk useless. I am here, because I made it here, through my own strengths. Bakugo Katsuki, Izuku walked up to his childhood abuser with cool poise. Such a shame, you haven't changed a bit after so many years. Let him and me go. Why you fucker? Katsuki snarled, teeth chattering from the cold. Not yet, Izuku replied, before turning to Aizawa, I won't take long. He turned back to the blonde. Listen well, Kaken. He spat the nickname like it was poison, despite there being no significant difference in his vocal tone. You are not the top dog here. This is not middle school. Whatever score you got in the entrance exam, I surpassed it. I am no longer the useless Deku that you used to beat up and abuse all those years ago. I have power now, and very little patience. Try anything funny with me, and I will kill you where you stand. Get that in your empty head, for I won't be gracious enough to warn you next time. Aizawa saw fit to intervene before Katsuki died from hypothermia. Midoriya, that's enough. Unfreeze him right now. Izuku complied, releasing his tormentor and dropping him to the ground. Bakugo, we are going to have a serious talk after this, Aizawa spoke darkly, ignoring the violent shivers racing across the blonde's skin. Todoroki, help him warm up. Izuku would be blind to not see the sheer reluctance on the dual quirk teen's part, as he knelt down beside Katsuki and used his left side to spread heat over his body. Let's get this done with. Come forward, Midoriya. Izuku went up to the circle, and Aizawa tossed him a softball. With the ball in his palms, Izuku channeled his power to encircle the sphere. Snow and ice crystals formed a layer over the softball, and it began to vibrate softly. The ball rose up from his palms, and like a comet, it ascended up into the blue sky, quickly disappearing from sight. Aizawa tracked the ball's distance until it couldn't be tracked any further. He showed the result to the class. Just like Uraraka, Midoriya has also clocked an infinity score for the ball throw test. And with that, we have come to the end of the assessment test. These are the final results. The hobo tapped a few buttons and held the device with the display facing up. A holographic screen emerged, listing the names of all 20 students in descending order according to their placements. Izuku nodded to himself. He was in a respectable second place behind a Yaoyorozu Momo, which isn't really surprising, given how versatile her creation quirk is. In third place is Todoroki Shadow, who looked decidedly displeased, followed by Katsuki in fourth. Izuku's eyes then trailed down to the very bottom of the list, where one Minta Minoru had the unfortunate fate of being placed. Minta, get out. You're expelled, said Aizawa with no hint of uncertainty. The wailing and temper tantrum that followed from the bald-headed midget was almost expected. Izuku had been silently observing his classmates throughout the test, and Minta was a textbook example of humanity's failures. The only time Minta actually used his quirk in a useful manner was in the sidesteps test. The rest of the assessment, he was basically half-assing it, for the lack of a better term. He was lazy, no drive, and his behavior towards the female students left a lot to be desired. I don't give a flying fuck that your father is on the board of governors. The heroics course has no room for half-assing and perverted behavior. Aizawa sliced through like a hot knife through butter. Get out, before I call security on you. The screaming and crying only grew worse, and the other students were becoming increasingly annoyed. Izuku solved the problem quickly by encasing Minto entirely in ice. 2 hovering robots appeared shortly after. They plucked the small iceberg containing the midget up from the ground and carried it away. Aizawa turned back to the remaining 19. As I said, just because you are here now, that does not mean that you will be here tomorrow. Shape up, or you will end up like Minto. Now, we're done for today. Head back to class and grab your syllabus and timetable. Bakugo, follow me. The seething blonde trudged after the hobo. Slowly, the rest of the class disbands, and thus, the first day of term comes to an end. Izuku knew that something big was happening when the bell for homeroom rang, and Katsuki failed to show up. The explosive blonde he had known throughout his entire life would never lower himself to being late for school. Something must have happened to him. Aizawa strolled into the room, looking decidedly more awake and alert than usual. Before we begin with homeroom, I have an announcement to make. Bakugo Katsuki has been transferred to the general education course until further notice. His behavior during the Quirk assessment test yesterday was unacceptable and dangerous. He will remain there until he grows up and learns how to control his anger. A low murmur spread across the class. Let this be an additional warning to everyone here, Aizawa continued. If your behavior is not up to standard, or if you pose a danger to your classmates, you will be dealt with. Yui upholds a zero-tolerance policy towards bullying and detrimental behavior. The reason I didn't expel Bakugo outright is because his quirk can easily be used for villainy, and I will not allow the possibility of him going rogue to come true. However, if he fails to show any improvement, Bakugo will be expelled, and the same applies to each of you here today. Am I clear? Yes, sensei. Good. Now we can proceed with homeroom. Do whatever you want, but keep the volume down. I didn't get much sleep last night, and I will assign detention to those make too much of a ruckus. With that said, the tired hobo slipped into his sleeping bag, slumped onto the floor, and fell asleep. Bakugo actually getting kicked out of the heroics course, Izuku thought to himself as he stared out of the window. Never in my life did I expect to see the day that it happened. The 18 remaining students of WANA had 2 lessons after homeroom: English with Present Mike and Modern Art History with Midnight. Lunch was a quiet affair for Izuku, sitting by himself as he ate his midday meal. He returned to the classroom with about 10 minutes to spare. For the afternoon, there was only one lesson on the agenda: Foundational Heroics. Izuku had no idea what that would entail, but that was far from his thoughts. It was honestly a little surprising that a school would take action against Katsuki's villainous behavior. But then again, this was Yui, the top heroics school in the country, not some no-name middle school like Aldera. An institution like Yui couldn't afford the bad publicity if word got out that they had accepted a student with villainous behavior into the heroics course. Izuku was shaken out of his thoughts when the bell rang. Any minute now, and the teacher who will helm the foundational heroics lesson would arrive. The door slammed open. I am, Izuku sighed. The fucking course. Coming through the door like a regular person. Why wouldn't the top heroics school in the country not hire the top pro hero in the country as a teacher? As Izuku pinched his nose in a bid to maintain his composure, the rest of his classmates were losing their minds as All Might strode into the room. Holy shit. Am I dreaming? No fucking way. All Might is our teacher. The symbol of peace faced the class at the lectern. Good afternoon, young heroes-to-be. Today is your first ever foundational heroics lesson. I am going to put all of you through the ringer and mold you into the heroes of tomorrow. Your journey begins today, with today's agenda. All Might pulled a stylized card out from somewhere. Battle Trials. The card disappeared to someplace. We will head down to ground beta for today's lesson. But first, you all will need these. Out from a wall, 4 metal drawers emerged, each holding 5 metal briefcases. Your hero costumes are ready for your appraisal. Get changed, young heroes, and I'll see you on ground beta. Ignoring his male classmates' excited chatter in the background, Izuku went to a quiet corner of the locker room to get changed. Setting his briefcase down on a bench, he opened it and began pulling out the contents. His hero costume comprised of 2 layers. The base was a skin-tight, sleeveless bodysuit of sparkling icy blue. On top of that were pieces of armor with a shimmering snow-white coating and were decoratively embossed with snowflakes. Izuku put on the bodysuit, and then individually attached each armor piece one at a time, starting with the chest plate and sharp-edged pauldrons, second with gauntlets with guards protecting his lower arms, third, a belt with plates that fell over his buttocks as protection, and ending with armor-plated boots that covered his legs from the knees down. The final item was a headpiece that framed his face, had an intricate snowflake over the forehead, and along each ear were 3 patterned diamonds that resembled wings. Izuku had made his way towards the door when the same blonde whom he saved during the entrance exam turned to him. Real cool, man. You watch Saint Seiya? What? You know, Saint Seiya. Kaminari Denki replied. The pre-Quirk era anime about mystical warriors who fight against Olympian gods who want to dominate Earth. Izuku just stared at the blonde, before stepping out of the exit without a further word. Denki, unfazed, turned to an adjacent Kirishima Ijiru. He might just deny it, but I'll bet my entire collection of records that he based his look on Cygnus Hyoga. Wanna be my witness? Whatever, man. There were already a few students waiting at ground beta when Izuku arrived. Shaojima and Takoyami Fumiko were present, as were Ajiro Mashurao and Sadu Rikido. The latter two were engaged in conversation, while the former were not, until Izuku approached, and Fumiko turned around at the sound of armored boots clinking on the tarmac. Midoriya, I never pegged you as a Saint Seiya fan. Again came a what? You do know what Saint Seiya is, right? Asked the bird-headed girl. No. Fumiko stared unblinkingly at Izuku for a moment, before turning away, muttering about the complexity of humankind. More students eventually showed up, and once everyone was present, All Might commenced the lesson. The outfit makes the hero, so they say. You all look absolutely spectacular. Izuku glanced at his classmates' costumes. He really wondered if All Might was blind or completely stupid. Achako looked decidedly uncomfortable in her skin-tight astronaut-themed outfit. And who on earth thought that style-toed boots were practical footwear? Momo would not look out of place in a stripper club. The leotard barely covered her breasts, left her abdomen exposed, and a line of padding just managed to cover her groin. And good heavens, was Hagakure Toru really not wearing anything other than a pair of gloves and boots? Izuku's power reacted without him doing anything. A stream of snowflakes shot towards the three girls and swirled around them. All Might fell silent as the magic in the frozen water returned the girl's modesty and interests. Momo had all exposed skin of her body, save for her abdomen, completely covered. Achako momentarily lost her balance as the heels were removed, her bodysuit becoming somewhat baggier. And Hagakure's presence increased as a visible jumpsuit appeared over her body. All eyes were on Izuku now. Young Midoriya. What did you just do? Yaoyorozu and Hagakure's costumes are a direct violation of the Protection of Minors Act, and Uraraka is visibly uncomfortable with her own. Whoever designed their costumes deserve to be impaled on icicles and have their corpses put on public display as a warning to those who wish to sexualize female minors. Those standing near to Izuku quickly stepped away, though an avian-like shadow being that emerged from Fumiko's cloak gave a thumbs up and a loud noise. All Might cleared his throat. Right. Anyways, welcome to Ground Beta, everyone. This is where you will learn the basics of pro-heroism and how to maintain justice for the people you will serve. Ida Tenya shot a hand into the air. All Might Sensei. Will we be doing city-wide maneuvers as part of the exercise? Not quite, young Ida. In fact, All Might's general ineptitude as a teacher came to light, as the students saw this as open season to bombard him with questions that the man found himself quickly inundated with. How are we going to grouped or paired? How will we be graded? Will the worst-performing group be expelled? Does my cape look très chic? Wait. All Might boomed, and the onslaught ceased. Not so fast. I don't have super hearing. Let me explain the exercise we're doing today. Izuku was far from impressed, even more so when the symbol of peace actually pulled a pamphlet from somewhere and began reading off of it. The battle trials will see the class split into two groups, heroes and villains. Every team will comprise of a pair, and you will face off another team in an enclosed setting at a time limit. The goal of the villain team, in this exercise, is to safeguard a bomb for the entirety of the time limit and or incapacitate the hero team before the limit. The hero team's goal is to secure the bomb, and or incapacitate the villain team before time's up. The pamphlet disappeared to someplace. We will determine the teams by lots. I know that some of you might have already made friends with one another, but in the real world, you don't always get to choose who you work with. After a few minutes of drawing lots, the pairings were decided. Team A, Midoriya Izuku and Yaoyorozu Momo. Team B, Shaojima and Todoroki Shoto. Team C, Ida Tenya and Kaminari Denki. Team D, Aoyama Yuo and Ashido Mina. Team E, Sadu Rikido and Uraraka Achako. Team F, Jiro Kaiuka and Kuda Kuji. Team G, Takoyami Fumiko and Asui Tsuyu. Team H, Ajiro Mashurao and Hagakure Toru. Team I, Kirishima Ijiru and Shiro Hanta. With that settled, we can now determine the factions. Again, this will be done entirely at random. As All Might busied himself, Izuku heard footsteps approach. Midoriya-san. Yaoyorozu. I never realized that my original costume idea actually violated the law. Momo said, I can't thank you enough for rectifying it. Izuku grunted, as All Might called attention back to him. Before the man were two boxes, one white and the other black. The white one had a H on the front, and the black had a V from both boxes. He pulled out two balls, one with an A and the other D. The first bracket will see Team as the heroes, and Team D as the villains, while the rest of the class went to a viewing room to spectate the upcoming battle trial. All Might led the two teams to an office building. Team D was allowed to enter first, while Izuku and Momo were given 10 minutes to strategize. What do you think our opponents intend to do? They will split up, Izuku replied immediately, looking ahead at the door. While there is no animosity between Aoyama and Ishido, I am fairly confident that they will believe that by splitting up, they can cover more ground. I hope that you are open to doing the same, Yaoyorozu. Split up. Yes, I am able to hold my own, and this exercise will be good practice for you to find your bearings. Your quirk is incredibly versatile, but you lack the confidence because this all new territory for you. Take this as an opportunity to learn your opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Momo didn't quite know how to respond to that. All Might's voice crackled in their communication devices. Team, you may enter the building now. The trial begins now. The pair enters. Once inside, Izuku places a hand against the wall. The concrete began to glow an icy blue, and Izuku closed his eyes as if concentrating. What are you doing? Asked Momo. Izuku pulled his hand away. As I expected, Aoyama and Ishido split up. Yaoyorozu, can I expect that you will be careful, but won't hold back when the time comes? Still a bit perturbed from her question not being answered, Momo could only nod. Izuku then broke away from her, running deeper into the building. He navigated the staircases and hallways, occasionally placing his hand against the wall. In most cases, snow and ice couldn't penetrate through concrete and travel around. His power was different, acting almost like a listening device to tell him every single activity or movement in the building. Right now, it told him that someone was coming down the corridor where he was standing. Izuku quickly darted into a dark corner, just as the person in question appeared. It was Mina, and she ran past him without even noticing that he was there. That means that either Aoyama is roaming somewhere else, or she is guarding the bomb. Probably the latter. Once the coast was clear, Izuku continues his move. Climbing another flight of stairs and down another corridor, he placed his hand against the wall once more. His power scans the entire floor, before narrowing on a single room. He knows where he needed to go. Meanwhile, several floors down, Momo had just turned a corner when she came face to face with Mina. We meet, hero, ready to fight. Momo didn't respond. Either way, she was going into battle. Her mind worked into overdrive, thinking of strategies to defend herself against her opponent's acid. A shield then. From her exposed abdomen, Momo created a large shield made of a steel alloy, mixed with nickel and copper. It was about the size of those shields used by riot police. The battle commenced. Mina released a stream of acid that Momo blocked with her shield. The corrosive liquid simply splashed off, leaving no significant damage. A barrage followed, and for a while, Momo was on the defensive. I can't afford to give her the advantage. I need to act now. After holding back another blast of acid, Momo created a device from her abdomen. Taking a leap of faith, she surged forward, activated the device, and pushed it into Mina's exposed cleavage. The sound of electric currents running echoed through the corridor. Mina jerked and shook as she was induced with a mild, but noticeable electric shock. 20 seconds she was subjected, before she collapsed in a heap onto the floor. Momo pulled the device back. She was breathing hard, the adrenaline of taking down an opponent still coursing through her veins and rattling every nerve it passed by. She barely heard the announcement All Might made. Ishido Mina of Team D has been incapacitated. It was around this time that Izuku had reached the room where his power had guided him towards. He was facing off against Yu when the announcement reverberated overhead. Nonetheless, Yu remained unfazed. It may just be me now, but I'll show you, with all of my magnifique, sparkling glory, that I will withstand any. Izuku doesn't let her finish. A sharp crackling, and the armored Yu is encased in ice. She is stuck in her grandiose theatrics, and ... are her sparkles also frozen too? Izuku got closer. True enough, the sparkles that dotted around Yu's head have frozen into place, mid-sparkling. Must be part of her quirk or something. Shaking his thoughts clear, Izuku moved past the iceberg and placed a hand on the weapon. Weapon intercepted. The following announcement brought the exercise to an end. Tima wins. The trial had concluded. All Might returned to the building in record time to pick up the two teams. Both an unconscious Mina and shivering Yu were wheeled off to the infirmary, while Izuku and Momo returned the viewing room alongside All Might. So, the symbol of peace brought the attention back to himself. Who is the MVP of the trial that you all just witnessed? For a few moments, no one spoke up, either because they didn't know or weren't quite sure who fit the bill better. Eventually, Tenya spoke up. All Might Sensei, after some deliberation, I believe that Midoriya should be the MVP. No offense to you, Yaoyorozu-san. None taken, Momo replied, slightly bemused when the robotic student went down into a perfect 90 degrees. Why do you think so, young Ada? All Might asked. While Yaoyorozu made an impressive showing battling Ishido, Midoriya did most of the strategizing and dealt with Aoyama in an incredibly efficient manner. Also, while I would say that the decision to split up is debatable, it did allow Yaoyorozu to show off her skills and prowess against a good opponent. Hence my decision, All Might Sensei. The symbol of peace burst into bellowing laughter. Excellent thought process, young Ida. And there you have it. Young Midoriya is the MVP of this trial. The entire class applauded politely. Izuku gave them an acknowledging nod. All right then, it is time to proceed to the next trial. Team C and D, please follow me. Watching the subsequent battle trials certainly was insightful, if also entertaining. Team E were the heroes, and Team C the villains. Tenya certainly got in on the act, taking things a bit too much into exaggerated territory, if Izuku had anything to say about it. Either way, the heroes of this trial certainly put on a commendable effort. Rikadu and Ochako had no problems working together, scouting out the location of the weapon as a pair. They did encounter Denki, who attempted to incapacitate them with his signature power move of unleashing 1,000,000 volts of electricity at once. However, Rikadu was able to knock him out before the electrocution could commence. Once Team E had located Tenya and the bomb, Rikadu downed a packet of sugar to bump his strength up. An all-out brawl between Rikadu and Tenya took place, allowing Ochako to secure the bomb while Tenya was distracted. After some deliberation, it was decided that Rikadu and Ochako were joint MVPs of the trial. Teams B and H were up next. To call it a trial was an overstatement. It was over extremely fast. Mai didn't even get a chance to do anything other than scope out where Team H were. Shadow had told his towering, multi-armed partner to leave the building, and simply froze the entire structure with his eyes. Both Meshurao and Tori were incapacitated, allowing Shadow free rein to get the weapon and win the trial for the heroes. Later, once all four were back in the viewing room, All Might asked the class again, "Who do you think is the MVP?" The answer should have been clear. No one. All eyes turned to Izuku. What do you mean, young Midoriya? No one is the MVP, not even Todoroki. No one expected what came next. Xiaoji might have used her enhanced hearing to scope out the villain team, but she was not able to do anything else because Todoroki froze the entire building, which by the way is excessive and unnecessary. It might have stopped the villains, but Todoroki had no regard for collateral damage. If this was real life, innocent civilians will be at risk. And this does not include the fact that Todoroki refused to work with Xiaoji to deal with the villains and intercept the weapon. He wanted to do everything by himself and achieve the goal, without caring about his partner or the villains, which at the end of the day are still his classmates. Can you imagine what will happen to Asui if she was one of the villains in the exercise? For those in Wano who remembered their biology lessons, it didn't need to be said about the adverse effects on Tsuyu's body should the temperature suddenly plummet without warning. If Todoroki hadn't gone Lone Ranger on this exercise, perhaps Xiaoji, as well as Ajiro and Hagakure could have had a chance to show off their skills. So that is my answer, sensei. All was silent for a moment, before All Might cleared his throat. Right, anyways, let's proceed with the rest of the trials. Izuku ignored the heated look from Shadow. The subsequent trial was an interesting viewing experience. All Might, rather belatedly, realized that with 9 teams instead of 10, one team did not have an opposing team to fight against. So, after a suggestion from Momo, one team was disbanded, and the remaining 6 students were regrouped into 2 teams of 3. Team 1, Fumiko, Kayuka, and Ijiru. Team 2, Kuji, Hanta, and Tsuyu. Admittedly, after the over-the-top power move courtesy of Todoroki Shadow, the final match of the day was comparatively mundane. There was a lot of quirk use and hand-to-hand combat of varying proficiency. Fumiko's quirk, Dark Shadow, made things difficult for Hanta. Ijiru tanked a swarm of birds Kuji summoned with their quirk, while Tsuyu and Kayuka went neck-to-neck on trying to subdue the other. The free-for-all lasted 20 minutes, before finally, Team 1 managed to get ahead and intercept the weapon, securing their victory. The entire team was declared MVPs. And with that, the lesson came to an end. All Might bade the class farewell and disappeared with a great rush of wind to someplace. The students of Wano glanced at one another before heading back to the locker rooms. It was clear that the lesson was over. Izuku carefully removed his armor pieces. He was just slipping out of his bodysuit when footsteps approached him from behind. Midoriya. He turned around. Shadow had come to him, eyes stormy and lips drawn in a tight line. What is it, Todoroki? I'm not him. And I never said that you were. Midoriya folded his bodysuit and placed it on the bench. He continued putting his uniform on, but if you're not careful, you risk becoming just that. I will never. So you say. Izuku finished tying his tie. It's just a friendly reminder. Shadow was clearly gritting his teeth now. The other boys stared in morbid fascination. Have a good day, Todoroki. Izuku left the changing room without another word, leaving behind a tense atmosphere that would only dissipate once Shadow had departed. It was a new day again, and it was back to school. Izuku quietly took his seat and waited for homeroom to begin. It had been complete bedlam at the front gates. Somehow, the press had gotten word that All Might was a teacher at Yui and descended upon the students like vultures on a carcass. Izuku had been targeted, but after he froze a reporter's microphone into a block of ice, they left him alone long enough for him to enter through the gates. Come the first bell, Aizawa sauntered in, holding a steaming mug that was easily 1 gallon in volume. Izuku couldn't blame him, especially if he had been dealing with those vultures outside the gates. Now, before we begin with homeroom, I need to make a few announcements, Aizawa drawled, once all attention was on him. Yaoyorozu, Hagakure and Uraraka, please find time, either later during lunch or at the end of the day, to head down to the support department and finalize the changes to your hero outfits. What Midoriya did yesterday was satisfactory, but if you wish to make any changes beyond that, please see that you have them done as soon as possible. Yes, sensei. The three girls chorused back. Aijuru raised his hand. Aizawa-sensei, Midoriya said yesterday that their costumes violated the law. Will whoever designed the costumes be dealt with? Yes, Kirishima, Aizawa replied. Midoriya came to me yesterday to inform me about the inappropriate costumes. The designers have been expelled, and a police report has been filed against them. Now that that's out of the way, we can get straight to business. There is something important we need to do today. Izuku eyed the nervous looks among a few of his classmates. Did they think that Aizawa was going to spring a pop quiz? We're going to choose the class representatives. A beat of silence. One could literally feel the air of relief that descended upon the students that feared the possibility of a pop quiz. However, that was quickly broken by a great cacophony of voices, each louder than the other, desperate to be heard by the eternally tired hobo standing at the lectern. I'll be representative. No me. Pick me. Izuku closed his eyes, trying to stop the headache that was rapidly forming. Everyone, cease this behavior at once. All eyes, save for Aizawa and Izuku, turned to Tenya. The role of the class representative is a sacred duty that must never be taken lightly. The bespectacled robot chopped his hands. They are supposed to represent this class and look out for every single member of 1A. To see it as nothing more than a title is a shame upon basic decency. Damn it, the headache had fully blossomed. We must uphold the values of fairness and elect our representatives through a democratic vote. But won't everyone just vote for themselves? Someone interjected. We've only known each other for a short time, Kiro. Tsuyu added. How do we know who is the best choice? That does not matter, Tenya shouted. The final decision lies with the candidate with the most votes. He turned to Aizawa, sensei. Do you approve of this vote? Do it however you want. Just get it done before homeroom ends. The hobo was already slipping into his sleeping bag. Do not disturb me unless you are ready or someone is dying. Slips of paper were created, courtesy of Momo, and distributed around the class, rubbing his temples in a bid to soothe his headache. Izuku considered his options. Yaoyorozu would be a good candidate, and it would certainly help boost her confidence. And since Ada is the cause of my headache, I'll put his name down. But then again ... he probably wants one of the positions anyway. He wrote down the two names, went up to the lectern and cast his vote. Once all 18 students have made their decisions, Tenya went up and tallied the votes. Yaoyorozu Momo, 3 votes. Ida Tenya, 2 votes. Midoriya Izuku, 2 votes. Who the hell voted for me? Izuku wondered, feeling his headache worsen. Somewhere along the line, Aizawa emerged from his cocoon of a sleeping bag. Since we are at an impasse with Ida and Midoriya, we will have another vote to determine who will win the second position. I refuse. All eyes were on Izuku. Midoriya, I refuse to be a candidate. I have no intention of being a class representative. Give the position to Ada. Are you sure? Aizawa-sensei, I have a headache that is progressively getting worse. Please give Ada the position. The hobo nodded. Very well. Yaoyorozu and Ada come to the front. Both did, and faced their classmates. These are your new class representatives. Treat them with respect and do not give them hell. I promise to do my best, said Momo. Likewise, Tenya parroted. Aizawa turned to Izuku. Do you need to see Recovery Girl? The white-haired Ice King stood up and left the classroom without a further word. That was all the response needed. The Medi-heroine sorted out his headache quickly, though she advised him to avoid consuming anything cold as a precaution. The lunch bell was a welcome reprieve. Izuku sat his tray down, one extra large bowl of katsudon and hot milk tea, and dug in. Lessons had been a bit of a bore today, and any form of time away from the classroom was a welcome treat. Just as he was about to take another bite of his lunch, a loud alarm blared across the cafeteria. Attention students, this is a level 3 emergency. An intruder has infiltrated the grounds. Please evacuate to the nearest assembly points quickly and calmly. Izuku swallowed that bite, as absolute pandemonium broke out. While the students rushed for the exit, screaming and shoving one another to save their hides, Izuku continued his lunch as if nothing had happened. He did glance out of the window to see if there was indeed an intruder. It was only the press. Somehow, they managed to get in through the gates, but to him personally, no cause for personal alarm. Somewhere along the line, Izuku heard a loud voice that sounded like it came from Tenya, though he ignored it in favor of his drink. Then came a second announcement. Intruder has been neutralized. All students, please return to your previous activities. Izuku set down his empty cup. Taking his tray to the return point, he exited the cafeteria back to the classroom for afternoon lessons. Izuku never expected that the break-in by the press had a more sinister message. Then again, the revelation that the reason that the break-in happened was due to someone disintegrating the front gate was never made public to the students. The day itself had started so normally too. This afternoon, you all will have a special lesson on rescue training, Aizawa announced during homeroom. Being a hero is not all taking down villains and smiling for the cameras. Be it natural disasters or man-made calamities, people are going to get trapped and injured. It is the duty of pro-heroes to help these civilians and get them to safety. Rescue training, Izuku inwardly remarked. This ought to be interesting. Come dressed in your hero outfits and meet me by the parking lot behind building by the end of lunch. We will take the bus to the facility where the lesson will take place. Must be a big facility if the main campus does not have the space to house it. Anyways, Izuku finished his lunch earlier, got dressed into his hero outfit, and was among the first to arrive at the meeting point. Momo and Tenya were already there, as were Fumiko and Mai. The rest of the class trickled in over the next 10 minutes before Aizawa himself showed up. Good, you're all on time, the hobo nodded. The bus will be here shortly. No sooner than a minute after, a self-driving bus rolled up and came to a stop before the class. Immediately, Tenya began herding the class into 2 rows, believing that he was adhering to the seating layout of the bus. Izuku would almost find it comical when the bespectacled robot realized that layout was far different and physically deflated at his error. The class boarded at their own pace, Momo guiding a distraught Tenya to his seat and Aizawa boarding last. The doors closed with a hiss and off they went. Izuku settled down in his seat, ignoring the conversations around him and slowly drifting off. However, before he could fall into a nap, a finger prodded his arm. What is it? Tsuyu held a finger to her lip. A tick of hers. Are you related to Todoroki? You two have similar quirks. No, I'm not. We just have similar powers, Izuku replied curtly. Tsuyu nodded. You are very cold, Midoriya. Does her quirk have anything to do with it? Yes, it does. Tsuyu never said anything else, knowing that the conversation was over. The rest of the journey passed peacefully. Izuku managed to catch that short nap before the bus came to a stop. Everyone, off the bus, we're here, said Aizawa. The students disembarked and were greeted by the tremendous sight of a towering glass dome that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Holy shit, is this Universal Studios Japan? Aijuru asked excitedly. Not exactly, Kirishima-kun. From the entrance of the dome, a person clad in a costume that resembled an astronaut suit emerged and waved to the class. Oh my god, Achako squealed. It's the space hero, 13. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, Class 1A, otherwise known as the USJ facility. 13 introduced to the students. Here, you will be trained on how to rescue civilians from disaster zones. If you will all follow me, I will show you everything the USJ has to offer. The rescue hero herded the students into the dome, leading them through another doorway into the facility proper. It was stunning. The vast indoor space had so many sights for the eyes to relish. The USJ facility is home to 6 zones that simulate every known disaster, natural and man-made, said 13. They began introducing each one at a time. Those 2 domes over there replicate conflagration and flooding scenarios. Towards the left, we have the landslide and mountain zones. On your direct left, we have a ruins zone simulating the aftermath of an earthquake. And in between the conflagration and flood domes is the shipwreck lake. In today's lesson, you will be split up into groups of 3 and assigned a specific zone where it will be your task to rescue as many civilians as possible. Excited murmuring spread amongst the students. Izuku stayed quiet, watching out of the corner of his eye as Aizawa approached 13 and spoke to them in hushed tones. Izuku was able to pick up snippets of the conversation, All Might's name sticking out the sharpest. 13 raised 3 fingers, and Izuku began putting the pieces together. All Might was supposed to be here, and yet he wasn't. The symbol of peace had used up his time limit for the day, but for what reason, Izuku didn't know. 13 returned towards the students and gave a short speech about the importance of today's lesson. It was very poignant and extremely humbling. Quirks could easily cause as much damage and suffering as Mother Nature could. All it took was for someone with evil corrupting their heart to unleash calamity upon so many others. And while the baseline was to bring the culprit to justice, it was also the unnegotiable duty of pro-heroes to assist and take part in the rescue and salvage of victims before lives were irrevocably lost. When the rescue hero finished their speech, Izuku's applause was among the loudest. Now, as we begin with today's lesson, Aizawa here will divide you into your... The overhead lights suddenly flickered, before their bulbs exploded one after the other, tearing his eyes away from the strange occurrences. Izuku noticed the air around the central plaza pulsate and distort. Is this part of the lesson? Aijuru asked, not yet aware of what was about to happen. Then, the literal air around the central plaza tore apart. A dark miasma grew in size by the second, until it encompassed the entire width of the plaza. Hundreds of people, all sinister looking and out for innocent blood, poured out of the miasma en masse. Immediately, Aizawa was on high alert. 13. Protect the students. These are villains. Unlike his panicking classmates, Izuku remained frigidly calm. This ought to be interesting. Leading the crowd of villains was a skinny young man with unkempt blue hair and covered head to toe in disembodied hands. By his side was a person that appeared to be made entirely of mist, and a towering beaked monster that looked more like something out of nightmares. The hand man swept his gaze over the students. Strange. All Might isn't here. He's supposed to be here. Was there a change of plans? The chuckle that came was full of childish sadism. Oh well, maybe if we murder some of his pride and joy, he will. He never got to say anything else. From Izuku's armored boot, ice crackled to life. At supersonic speeds, ice shot down the stairs leading to the central plaza. Before anyone, hero or villain, could react, the entire plaza had been frozen. Every single villain present found themselves encased to the neck in ice, while the two leaders and the monster were completely frozen. For a full moment, nobody moved. Midoriya, what on earth? Izuku ignored his teacher, instead heading down the stairs. Midoriya, get back. He swept his hand. A wall of ice, about a meter thick and as high as the dome itself, raced across the stairs and beyond, cutting one and the teachers off from Izuku and the villains. Shit, Aizawa cursed. He turned back to his class. Todoroki, melt the ice, right now. One could literally feel the great reluctance from the dual Quirk team. Hurry up. Your classmate is putting himself in danger. Faced with no other decision, Shadow stepped forward and placed his left hand on the ice. Half-heartedly and with great despair, he began melting the wall. Meanwhile, Izuku had gotten to the foot of the stairs. He made his way to the plaza, lazily eyeing the shivering and gasping villains trapped in his ice. He glanced at the two ringleaders and the towering monster. HMPH, he headed over to a random villain. Now, tell me, who are all of you? Evidently, he found a villain who had enough intelligence to know that talking was the only thing he could do. His quirk had been rendered useless by the ice, and the hero student before him could easily kill him if he so wished. T, the handman BB brought us all together. H, he called us the L League of V villains. Alright, and who is this handman? H, his name is S. Shigaraki Tamura, and T, the mist guy, is K. Kurogiri. Why are you all here? Or SS supposed to K kill the symbol of PPPs? How? You lot or that monster? With T, that monster. It's CC called a Namu. And S. Shigaraki said that its C can easily surpass All Might. Interesting, Izuku muttered, stepping away from the shivering villain towards the frozen leaders. He eyed Shigaraki and Kurogiri with mild interest. It was evident that the latter was the one who created the portal that got the villains here. He had no idea what was Shigaraki's quirk, or if he even had one at all, and while this Namu certainly appeared to have the strength, he wondered if it really could surpass All Might, or if Shigaraki was just blowing hot air. Oh well, best to mitigate the damage now. Izuku placed one hand on the ice encasing Shigaraki and the other on Kurogiri. The watching villains blanched as his hands glowed, and the bodies of their leaders seemed to disappear into the ice. Izuku stepped back and swung a foot into both ice structures, reducing them to tiny fragments. The villains cried and wailed, thinking that they were next. Izuku couldn't be bothered with them. Nothing but cannon fodder to make the leaders look more impressive. Turning his back from the villains, he swept a hand out at the ice wall running across the stairs. In an instant, the ice vanished, bringing his class and teachers back into view. The leaders have been neutralized. Aizawa-sensei, I think we should call the police now. Izuku was immediately ensnared by the hobo's capture weapon. The Yui staff were notified, and the police called down. Within minutes, the available teachers were herding the students out, while law enforcement personnel swarmed into the facility to arrest the over 200 villains and one genetically engineered monster that were quickly thawed out before they could succumb to frostbite and hypothermia. Recovery Girl was present, checking over the students for any physical injuries. The villains who were suffering from the effects of the frigid temperature were loaded into ambulances, while the rest were pushed into police cruisers to be driven to headquarters for interrogation. For the rest of 1A, the entire debacle felt unreal, almost like a fever dream, as Mina would aptly describe it. It was a strange moment, seeing their homeroom teacher drag one of their own out by the fabric of his capture weapon. The hobo went to a trench-coated man with a fedora, and spoke to him in tones that no one, not even Mai or Kayuka, could pick up. It became even stranger when Izuku was released from the capture weapon, only to have Quirk suppressant cuffs snapped onto his wrists, alongside handcuffs. No one could tear their eyes away as Izuku was led into a police cruiser, Aizawa and the man getting in after. It was only after the cruiser drove off did one of the other teachers, Midnight, dismiss the students back to the bus that they had taken earlier. As they were driven back to the main campus, no one said anything, too stupefied over the events they had just witnessed to open their mouths. They did share one common question though. What was going to happen to Izuku? Izuku drummed his fingers against the metal table. The interrogation room was Spartan. whitewashed walls, a lone lamp hanging from the concrete ceiling above. To one end, a single clock ticked away into the mid-afternoon, the other chair across the table from him still empty. It was a waiting game for whoever his interrogator was going to be, and when they will arrive. He glanced down at his left wrist. He was handcuffed to the chair, and the Quirk suppressant cuffs were still on. Though Izuku knew that they were pointless, he could still feel his power, the frigid cold of ice and snow crackling under his fingers, waiting to be released. It wouldn't be difficult to freeze the cuffs off and shatter them. Then, while it would be a tad harder, he could force his way out of the headquarters with his ice. But no, he wasn't going to. He'll entertain his interrogator and see what happens. If it comes to it, then he won't hold back. The door behind him opened. Izuku didn't turn around. The same man with the trench coat who had spoken to Aizawa sat down across from him. "Good afternoon, Midoriya. My name is Detective Tsukachi Naomasa. My quirk allows me to know whether someone is telling the truth or lying, so I hope you will be cooperative with me today." Izuku shrugged. "It's not like there's any benefit for me to lie here anyways." Tsukachi nodded. He had brought in an audio recorder and a notepad. He activated the device and got a pen ready. "What is your quirk, Midoriya?" "The ability to produce and control snow and ice." "Truth. What exactly happened after the villains arrived?" The one who had hands all over his body, Shigaraki Tamura, was perplexed that All Might was not with us. But he appeared gleeful after a second, saying that they will get the symbol of peace running over if they killed us. "Truth. I could not let them attack us, so I used my ice to freeze the villains the place. I had Shigaraki and a teleportation quirked villain named Kurogiri entirely frozen so they could not get away. I asked one of the fodder why they were here. He told me that they were to kill All Might, with the genetically engineered Namu that Shigaraki brought with him." "Truth." Tsukachi paled, but forced himself to continue. "I heard from Aizawa that you neutralized Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Eyewitness accounts stated that they were no longer in sight when you removed the ice wall keeping your classmates back. What exactly did you do?" "I killed them, Detective," Izuku replied. "I turned their bodies into ice and destroyed them." "Truth." Tsukachi muttered something about a confession, before continuing. "Why did you kill them? Are you aware that you can be brought up on charges of murder and illegal quirk usage?" Izuku leaned forward. If Tsukachi felt incredibly unnerved by the cold, unblinking irises staring straight into his soul, nobody other than himself needed to know that. "Would you rather have 20 corpses to contend with?" Kurogiri had a teleportation quirk, and I believe he would have split us up and teleported everyone into the different zones around the USJ, presumably where villains are waiting. I don't know what Shigaraki's quirk was, but he was criminally insane. He wanted to kill us all so that All Might would come running in, thus giving them the chance to finish him off too. I did what I did to save everyone else from getting hurt or killed." "Truth." Tsukachi sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "Midoriya, even if that's true, why did you kill Shigaraki and Kurogiri? You could have just kept them frozen and let the professionals deal with them." "Really, judging from how the invasion even happened at all, the professionals did a spectacular job beefing up the defenses. All Might used up his time limit doing who knows what instead of chaperoning the lesson." The detective's eyes bulged. Izuku sighed. "I overheard a conversation between Aizawa and 13. They weren't being very discreet, and I won't go around shouting this secret out from rooftops, if that makes you feel any better." Tsukachi sighed in relief, but Izuku wasn't done. "Furthermore, how do I know that someone in law enforcement won't slip up and allow Kurogiri to escape and take Shigaraki with him? A teleportation quirk is rare enough on its own, but for the user to be a villain too. Add to that, allowing a criminally insane villain like Shigaraki to run loose is only asking for trouble." "Truth. We have the securest facilities available to handle the most dangerous criminals," Tsukachi tried to argue. "Tell me then, have you ever had to hold a villain with a strong teleportation quirk in custody before?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. Slowly, Tsukachi shook his head. "Then you cannot make that assumption. Let's face it, by killing Shigaraki and Kurogiri, and incapacitating the cannon fodder, I protected my classmates and teachers from harm, and perhaps if one wants to be generous, saved the greater population from two dangerous villains who would cause untold damage if left to run free." "Truth." Tsukachi rubbed his hand down his face again. "Even so, you still murdered 2 people with your quirk. The charges still stand. You can try, but what will the public think?" Izuku raised an eyebrow. Even though the villains were not able to do anything, they still managed to invade what is arguably the most secure hero school campus in the entire country. This cannot be kept entirely under wraps. The press will learn about it, and if word gets out that the one who stopped potential bloodshed and death was arrested and tried for saving his peers, an uproar is all but inevitable. Do you wish to be at the front and center of the backlash? Truth. Tsukachi pinched the bridge of his nose. They were getting nowhere at this rate. Knocking came from the door. Detective. What is it? Officer Sansa. Principal Nezu wishes to speak to both you and Midoriya. Izuku's eyebrow raised again. What could the Chimera want? Let him in. The cat-headed officer nodded, opening the door wider to allow Nezu to enter. Tsukachi-kun and young Midoriya, I hope I'm not interrupting at an inopportune time. No, Nezu-san, you aren't, Tsukachi replied tiredly. The chimera grinned and climbed onto the bench that Izuku was cuffed to. Are you all right, Tsukachi-kun? You look incredibly exhausted. Everything that Midoriya said is true, Tsukachi replied, and it won't be easy to press charges against him, since he did technically protect his peers and teachers from harm. Yes, I heard, Nezu nodded. We find ourselves in quite the conundrum, aren't we? What young Midoriya did counts as vigilantism, but we will face significant backlash once word gets out that the hero of the day had been arrested and charged for protecting innocent lives from certain death. If we were to stick to the books, we might come out of this debacle worse off than before. Izuku took silent vindication at seeing Tsukachi sag even further. However, if we engage in a compromise that satisfies the needs of all parties, I think that we can move forward from this troubling event stronger than before. I'm proposing that young Midoriya be placed on probation. He will be housed in Yui, where he can be monitored by myself and the staff at all times. That way, young Midoriya can continue his education and training to be a pro hero, without having to worry about a criminal record hanging over his head. How does that sound, Tsukachi-kun? The detective looked conflicted, while Izuku remained completely expressionless. So what did Tsukachi decide in the end? Asked Aizawa. He agreed to the probational terms, as did young Midoriya. Currently, our Ice King is moving into a room that we've prepared for him as we speak. The eternally tired hobo nodded. Is there anything else? Yes, Aizawa-kun, there is. Whatever jovialness Nezu previously had melted away into seriousness. There is nothing wrong with following the rules, but sometimes we need to see the bigger picture. Are you saying that my decision to have Midoriya arrested was a bad one? While he did break the law, it was to protect his classmates and his teachers. And yes, I am aware that this counts as vigilantism too. However, in the case of Midoriya, we must also understand emotions are never a factor in his thought processes. He is so logic-driven that it becomes a fault. I'm sure you know the saying, the ends justifies the means, for all that it is controversial and divisive. If it means that the villains are dealt with and no innocent blood is spilt, Midoriya will do whatever it takes to ensure that outcome, even if he resorts to murdering the villains. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. How does that make my decision a bad one? Nezu sighed. I fear that we might have lost a valuable ally in this debacle. Midoriya. Yes, as I said, Midoriya is logic-driven to a fault, which in this world of heroism is a valuable trait to have, as much as I would like to debate that. Emotions may not be a factor, but he will be blind to not see your decision to have him arrested and interrogated as some form of betrayal. In his view, he was protecting the innocent. And what does he get for saving lives? Being treated like a criminal. He calls himself an Ice King, and rightly so. Whatever trust we managed to foster with him has completely evaporated after today's events, and it is highly unlikely that we will ever regain it. Aizawa considered his boss' words for a moment. Why are you so fixated on Midoriya? Despite his circumstances, Midoriya has been gifted a power that, with time, will rival the top heroes and worst villains of our time. And with the latter group is where my concerns lie. If we completely alienate Midoriya, we risk him going rogue. He could cause the entire collapse of this country if he so wished, and he will feel absolutely no remorse whatsoever. We must prove to Midoriya that we are not his enemies, while setting reasonable boundaries. Otherwise, I fear for the existence of even the innocent when the blizzard comes. Despite it being a warm evening, the air in the office was numbingly cold. It was unusual, going to bed and waking up in a room that was not his own. The living space generously provided by Nezu was an old office that nobody had used for some time, quickly cleaned and refurbished to resemble a bedroom. The bathroom was just down the hallway for convenience. Still, it was somewhat jarring to be in a space that wasn't made of ice. The walls were painted in ordinary white, and floors comprised of polished wood. Izuku figured that he could do with a small makeover. Placing a hand on the wall, his power spread his ice across the white. Crystal snowflakes formed intricate patterns across the icy blue. He did the same for the floors, just without the snowflakes. This would suffice for now. The students were given Friday and the weekend off to allow the school to beef up their defenses to prevent a repeat of the USJ incident. Admittedly, Izuku found the 3-day break rather dull. He was prohibited from leaving the grounds without express permission from Nezu, and he was only allowed to utilize Gym Gamma as a place to get his exercise. He didn't have the means of a laptop or television, so he wandered around the campus looking for something to entertain himself with. More often than not, he would be in the school library, mindlessly leafing through any and all books he thought were the slightest bit interesting. As he had lived alone for a few years, the sheer emptiness of the campus never really got to him. That wasn't to say that he was completely isolated. He received regular visits from Recovery Girl to check on his physical well-being, and Lunch Rush came around daily to cook his meals. It certainly helped him sustain the 3 days in near total isolation, until school resumed come the next Monday. Just as he expected, the press had gotten word about the failed invasion. But unlike the first round when they came in droves, clamoring about All Might's teaching position, the crowd of reporters was smaller. Nonetheless, the students were harassed, forcing the teachers to intervene a second time. It was no surprise that Aizawa looked absolutely done when he sauntered into class come the first bell. Before we begin, I have a few announcements to make, the hobo drawled. Before any of you ask, Midoriya was not charged in court for his actions at the USJ. He is, instead, currently serving probation under Yui's jurisdiction for the foreseeable future. Second, the sports festival will be held in 2 weeks' time. A beat of silence, before it was broken by a great uproar of excited noise. Aizawa activated his quirk with his signature glare, and the class shut up instantly. As I was saying, while I wasn't entirely convinced that we should hold the festival right after we were invaded by villains, I was overruled. Nezu believed that by holding the festival, we would give the press something else to focus on other than our apparent failure to upkeep our defenses. Also, it would send a strong message to other scheming villains that Yui is not to be messed with. As an extra precaution, we will have pro-heroes patrolling the stadium to keep those with sinister intentions out. The students nodded. 2 weeks, that is all the time you have left to train and prepare. In each of your years as a Yui student, you get one chance to showcase your capabilities and strengths to the entire country. Depending on your performance, doors can open or slam shut. Do not waste this opportunity. Aizawa then turned to Izuku. Midoriya, as you placed first during the entrance exam, you will be opening the festival with the competitor's pledge. Basically, a short speech. Yes, sensei. In truth, Izuku thought the sports festival was overrated. It was, effectively, glorified blood sports, a sanctioned event where students beat one another up until blood is drawn for public spectacle. While he wouldn't go so far as to call the whole event an affront to good taste, he just thought it was unnecessary. Have the students participate in a modified version of the Olympics or something. Not gladiatorial games from eras past. There was nothing he could do, though, other than to give his all. Ignoring all of the excited chatter from his classmates after Cementos dismissed them for lunch, Izuku got up and headed for the door. He opened it, and was met with several dozen pairs of eyes staring right back at him. It appeared as if the entire first-year cohort had gathered outside of 1A's classroom. Izuku blinked. Excuse me. Why are you all here? Out of my fucking way, extras. Izuku stopped himself from rolling his eyes. Indignant shouts and curses echoed as an all-too-familiar bully pushed himself to the front of the crowd. Their eyes met, and a great hush descended upon the students. Breaths were held, waiting for something to happen. Deku, good afternoon, Kaken, Izuku deadpanned. How is general education treating you? You motherfucker. Katsuki exploded, prompting the watching students to step back in fright. It's all your fucking fault. I'm supposed to be a hero, not some useless Gen N loser. An explosion of indignant shouting rocked the hallway. Izuku, for his part, was unfazed. So you haven't changed a bit. Why am I not surprised? Are you really determined to remain stuck in general education while the rest of us progress to heroism? Katsuki screamed bloody murder, rattling the windows. Just you fucking wait, useless Deku. I'll beat your motherfucking ass during the sports festival so hard, you won't even feel it when you get kicked out of the hero course. We'll see about that. Izuku remained stonily cold. Just don't go crying to your mother when you get trashed. Now move it, you're in the way. He grabbed Katsuki by the scruff of his collar and tossed him to the side so hard, the blonde fell to the floor with a loud thud. The spectating students parted ways for Izuku, lips drawn thin and eyes hard. He had wasted enough time already. He was sure the cafeteria queues were going to be bonkers by now. The advantage of being on probation in Yui is the easy access to the training facilities once school had concluded for the day. With a teacher's supervision, Izuku was given permission to use other facilities besides Gym Gamma to prepare for the sports festival. He wasn't allowed to know what the festival events are, but from a hint he received from Cementos, there were going to be 3 of such events. Quirks were, naturally, allowed during all 3, but after some thinking, Izuku surmised that he needed to train more than just his power. Thankfully, Yui had a solution for even that. Giant robots weren't the only mechanical androids in the school's arsenal. Smaller, human-sized robots with the latest artificial intelligence capabilities programmed into their systems gave Izuku the chance to work on his physical hand-to-hand combat, which, compared to his cryokinesis, was absolutely rubbish. The number of times he tasted faux leather could attest to that. A budding problem. A result of living on a mountain for 2 years and only using the natural landscape as his gym. It was impossible to completely eliminate it, but he'll do what he can, given the time constraints. Though, he'll probably be able to discern the different flavors of faux leather through taste alone by the time 2 weeks were over. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. It has been almost 2.5 weeks since the planned invasion of the USJ facility. and what was supposed to be the assassination of his greatest nemesis. 2 weeks since he sent Dr. Garaki in search for his two most loyal pawns, and consistently failed to receive word about their whereabouts. It has been 17 days since the blossoming terror known as the League of Villains has been reduced to a one-man army. He did not like this one bit. Things should not have turned out like this. The Namu was supposed to be his trump card, the very weapon that would expose All Might's weakness to the next generation of pathetic heroes. He knew that All Might could still win against his greatest creation, but not without exacerbating the injury he inflicted upon him all those years ago. Instead, his Namu gets taken away for examination by the police force. The invasion was rumored to not even gotten the chance to begin in the first place, and still no word of Tamura or Kurogiri. It was worrying, incredibly so. And there was little he could do, still hooked up to life support machines. If only All Might had not reduced to him a mere shadow of his former greatness, he could be out searching for answers and planning his revenge. Instead, he could only rely on that good-for-nothing doctor for updates, as he laid flat in his room, with only the whirring of said life support machines for company. Curse All Might, and curse whoever took his pawns away and set him God only knows how far back. Izuku stayed quiet, lost in peaceful meditation as his classmates chatted amongst themselves around him. The sports festival has arrived. 2 weeks of tasting faux leather had gotten him somewhere. It remained to be seen how much it would aid him in today's events. Midoriya. He turned around. Todoroki. All eyes were on them now, the conversations fading. We are both evenly matched, power-wise. However, I will prove to the entire country, today, that my ice will come out on top. A moment of silence, broken by a low whistle from Denki. Damn. Todoroki is going feral. Do what you will, Todoroki. Izuku turned away, ending the conversation right there and then. It was as clear a rebuff as any. One could literally feel the tension rise in the room. Shadow grit his teeth, ice beginning to form on his right fist. He meant his declaration of war seriously, and yet here his target was, treating him like some petulant child demanding attention. Hey, calm down, will ya? Bless Ijiru's pure soul. We're all friends here. No need to go at each other's throats. I'm not here to make friends. Shadow spat coldly. I will prove to everyone that my ice will be enough to win. The tension was literally stifling, but Izuku remained completely unaffected. Eyes closed, he resumed his meditation, feeling the ice and snow within him swirl in a gale of freezing cold. The door slammed open. Everyone, Tenya called out. We're moving out now. Please get into 2 lines. Opening his eyes, Izuku got up. He slipped into the middle of the left line. Once everyone had gotten information, Tenya and Momo led them out into the hallway. A few minutes later, they arrived at the gate, where the students of 1B were already waiting. Nervousness replaced the stifling tension from earlier. No one said anything, waiting for the gate to open. It eventually did, a few minutes later. Presenting to you all, the first-year heroics department, classes 1A and B. Loud orchestral music heralded their entry into the stadium. Easily 100,000 pairs of eyes, perhaps more, were all around them, watching as they trooped out like soldiers on a parade. They reached the rectangular field right in the middle, and broke formation. Present Mike, over the speakers, introduced the General Education Department next, followed by the Support Department, and ending with Management. In total, 219 students gathered in the field before a raised stage with a single microphone on it. Somewhere along the line, the R18 heroine, Midnight, appeared and made her way up to the stage. She produced a Cat O' Tails whip from her belt and cracked it in the air. It is now time for the competitor's pledge. I present to you all, Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A. The country's attention were now on him. Izuku broke away from his peers, climbed the steps up to the microphone, and cleared his throat. Plus ultra. 2 words, that was it. Some expected a short speech, others thought that Izuku was going to harangue the crowds with a moving soliloquy about heroism. Everyone was proven wrong. He only spoke those 2 words, broadcasted it to the entire nation, and stepped back down towards his peers. A long silence stretched. Nobody knew what to say, let alone react. Thank you Midoriya Izuku for that, admittedly, short speech. Present Mike broke the silence after someone with a cricket quirk began making the iconic chirps. With that out of the way, we can commence with the first round of the sports festival. Nimuri, it's all on you now. Thanks Azashi. Now, little children, prepare yourself for some tension. Midnight pulled a lever which appeared from somewhere, and on a large screen behind her, a slot machine rolled for several seconds, culminating in the jackpot of a visual. The first round will be an obstacle course. The slot machine blinked out in favor of a map. All 219 of you will run a route spanning the entire circumference of the stadium, totally 4 kilometers. It's free real estate on quirk use, so long as you don't use your quirks to deliberately injure your opponent. Also, if you go off course, you will be instantly disqualified. Only the top 42 students will make it to the next round, so make sure to give it your all. The screen disappeared, and across the field behind Midnight, a large set of metal doors rumbled open to a dark tunnel. Get ready, children. Make sure to stay behind the line until flag off. There was a great rush of movement as the over 200 students rushed into the tunnel to gain whatever edge they could against their peers. Izuku followed at a more sedate pace, near the back. The last thing he wanted was to get caught in the absolute bottleneck that was about to happen. And it wasn't as if he didn't have a plan that was going to win him this round to begin with. The countdown reached the bottom, and chaos ensued. While his peers crashed into one another in a complete mess of a start, Izuku was already moving. His power burst from his back in the shape of his wings, and he was airborne. Shooting straight through the tunnel, he flew out into the light and quickly surpassed Shoto and Katsuki, who had taken the lead for the first few seconds of the race. Midoriya Izuku of Class 1 steals the lead from Todoroki Shoto in a show of majestic flight. Will he be able to keep that lead with what is to come? Up ahead, Izuku spotted a huge army of robots, the very same ones used during the entrance exam, standing in wait for the students. As soon as they spotted Izuku, the robots swarmed towards him. Unfazed, Izuku pulled his power into his hands and attacked. Several robots fell out of the sky, encased in ice. Some exploded when barrages tore them apart, and others became statues after being immobilized. Either way, Izuku cleared through the first obstacle without breaking a sweat, and Midoriya Izuku breaks through with ease. If he can keep this up, this round will be in the bag for him. Ignoring Present Mike's commentary, Izuku carried on. Several hundred meters ahead, the second obstacle came into view. It was a vast canyon, with several plateaus connected by rope lines. He couldn't see the bottom, though Izuku knew that the school would have least placed airbags to prevent anyone who fell from dying. Lawsuits were aplenty if they failed to uphold this basic safety rule. Shooting over the canyon, he continued on his path. Another few hundred meters later, he came up to a large dirt field that at first looked so out of place that he had to stop and investigate it. Lowering himself down, Izuku inspected the dirt. He noticed some slightly raised circles within the dirt, and instantly he knew what they were. This was a minefield. Still, not a noteworthy obstacle for someone with flight. Izuku rose up again and continued on with the final leg of the course. The stadium came into view after a few minutes, and Present Mike's commentary grew louder. He saw a set of metal doors slide open, and he shot into a tunnel. The light at the other got closer and closer, and he flew straight through. With that, Midoriya Izuku is the first to return. Let's have a round of applause for our victor. As applause echoed across the stadium, Izuku touched down onto the concrete field. He glanced towards the screen. Most of the students were just clearing the canyon, while Shoto and Katsuki were tackling the minefield. It would probably be several more minutes before anyone else returns. Izuku sat down, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes. Ignoring Present Mike's commentary about the other students and the noises of the spectators, he slipped into his inner quiet, where he could be one with the snow and ice that swirled within him. Snow began to fall all over the field, though not everyone noticed. Most were too busy watching Shoto and Katsuki fight neck to cross the finish line first. Shoto managed to beat the explosive blonde by a hair's length and returned to a stadium where snow was beginning to accumulate on the field. Over the next few minutes, the rest of the students poured in. When the last one crossed the finish line, all of the snow on the ground rose and swirled around Izuku like a blizzard. The frozen water shot into the air and exploded into a shower of sparkling lights that rained down upon students like glitter. Yu was especially happy. "Welcome back, little children." Midnight called the attention back towards her. "Hope you all had an exhilarating time running through the course. Here are the rankings." A screen from earlier reappeared, showing the list of the top 42 students who made it across the finish line first. Congrats to those who made it to the next round. As for the rest of you, don't be too blue, there is always next year. With a bit of luck and perhaps more rigorous training, you'll break through like a champ. Now, please vacate the field so that we can proceed with the second event. The top 42 of you, please gather around. The lever appeared again, and Midnight pulled it. The slot machine rolled, before coming to a stop. The second round will be a cavalry battle. The screen switched to a visual of several Yui teachers in a specific formation. For this event, you will be in teams of 4 to 5. One of you will be the rider, while the rest supports you as the horse. The visual switched back to the rankings, but with an extra column based on your placing from the first round. You will be given a headband with a certain number of points. The goal of your team is to accumulate as many points as possible while protecting your own. Keep in mind that only the top 4 teams will progress on to the final round, so make sure to grab those headbands. Izuku nodded. That was doable, but Midnight suddenly cut in. That in of itself is boring as hell. Why don't we shake things up a bit? Suddenly, she pointed straight at Izuku. Midoriya Izuku, because you came in first during the obstacle course, your headband will be worth a whopping 10 million points. Dead silence. Also, to make things even harder, Midoriya will be forced to participate all by himself. He is not allowed to form a team with others, and his flight is restricted to a period of 10 seconds each time. How's that for a challenge? To his credit, Izuku's expression didn't change, even when 41 pairs of hungry, predatory eyes swiveled towards him with the intent to tear him apart. Shadow and Katsuki looked especially bloodthirsty, ready to enact their own revenges against him. Izuku's eyes hardened. Bring it on. The 41 students split off to form their teams, leaving Izuku all by himself. Midnight personally gave him his 10 million point headband, winking, "Give us all a show, will you?" Izuku merely nodded. If the audience wanted a show, they will get exactly that. It was a display of entertainment bait. Once all the teams had formed and received their headbands, they were positioned along the four sides of the field. Izuku was told to stand right in the middle of it, in full view of his competitors and the spectators. If a layperson had no context, it would appear as if Izuku was a rabbit set up for a massacre by the jaws of a pack of wolves. Nobody considered the performance that was about to happen. All teams to themselves in 3.2.1. An electronic alarm sounded. For a brief second, there was a rush of movement. The team surged towards Izuku, who remained deceptively still and calm. Shadow's ice crackled, and Katsuki screamed bloody murder with his explosions popping. Then, the blizzard struck. Izuku swept his hands, pulling up a storm of snow that quickly blotted him out from view. The swirling whiteout grew in size, forcing most of the teams to skid to a stop. However, one such team refused to be hampered. Led by Monoma Nito from 1B, they foolishly ran towards the blizzard in an attempt to break through, only to get instantly frozen into ice upon contact. In a show of brutal force, Midoriya Izuku shields himself in an impenetrable fortress of snow. Is this allowed? Midnight produced a megaphone from somewhere. Midoriya Izuku, you have 10 seconds to do something else, otherwise you will be forced to forfeit this round. In the center of the blizzard, Izuku's eyes hardened. Very well, then. Suddenly, streams of snow burst out of the spinning column like tendrils. They surged towards every single team, including Monoma, and plucked their headbands right out of their heads. The snow took the headbands back into the swirling blizzard, disappearing from sight. It happened so fast, no one had the chance to even react. Midoriya Izuku is single-handedly plucking his rivals' headbands like cherries, and the blizzard is still blowing strong. Can literally anyone do anything at this point? Katsuki's screams reached a new crescendo, and he had to be held back from leaping out of formation to attack the spinning blizzard by himself. Midnight spoke into the megaphone again. You have 10 seconds, Midoriya. Time to up the entertainment value. From within the blizzard, a lone headband shot up into the air within a comet of snowflakes. For a brief moment, no one knew what it was. However, Present Mike quickly realized its significance. Holy shit, that is the 10 million point headband. Midoriya Izuku has just released his greatest asset out of his stronghold. The tsunami of bedlam followed suit. Every single team rushed towards the headband. Quirks were used liberally, impeding some and boosting others. However, even released from his blizzard, Izuku remained control of his headband. When it appeared as if Team Shadow was just about to grab it, it suddenly surged away into the sky. On top of her teammates' arms, Fumiko sent Dark Shadow after it, but it too evaded the Shadow Being's claws. More teams would attempt to grab the coveted prize, but Izuku made the going extremely difficult. It quickly became a game of cat and mouse. Several teams lost formation as they stumbled, pushed and fought one another to grab the elusive headband. It was chaos, somewhat bloody and most important of all, entertaining for the spectators and those watching from home. Then, the countdown began. Listeners, you have 1 more minute. On cue, the 10 million headband shot away from Team Katsuki, arching back into the blizzard. A second later, every single headband that Izuku had previously taken were thrown out and scattered across the field. The bedlam intensified. The race was on to grab as many headbands as possible within the final minute. Screams, shouts, blows, and attacks reigned supreme. The fights grew uglier, as desperation took hold with precious seconds draining away. Morals and ethics was thrown to the wind in a hullabaloo of sanctioned depravity. And time's up. The blizzard settled, bringing Izuku back into visual existence. The 10 million headband had returned to its original place around his head. As for everyone else, they either hung on to whatever headbands they were able to protect, while many more were reduced to pieces of cloth dotting around the field. Midnight cracked her cat o' nine tails. And now, to present the results. The screen reappeared. First place, Team Midoriya. Second place, Team Shinsu. Third place, Team Todoroki. Fourth place, Team Bakugo. With that, the cavalry battle draws to a close. To those who didn't make it, there is always next year. And we have many fun activities lined up for you during the upcoming lunch break. The third and final round of the festival will begin in 2 hours. Come on, Shouta, let's go grab some grub. Izuku untied his headband and stuffed it into his pocket. It would serve as a memento of his experience causing unbridled chaos for the sake of entertainment. He moved to leave the field in search of his afternoon meal when a firm hand grabbed his wrist. Midoriya. He turned around calmly. Shadow gazed at him with stormy eyes, lips drawn thin. "What is it, Todoroki? I need to talk to you, privately." Normally, Izuku wouldn't have cared. He could have easily ripped his wrist from his classmate's grip, given the metaphorical finger by turning his back on him, and gone to grab his lunch. Instead, he humored the dual-haired teen. "Make it quick." Shadow led him to a quiet corridor far away from the main hub of activity. They came to a stop just before an unused exit, facing one another on opposite walls. "What is it?" Shadow's eyebrows dipped. "Do you think this is a game?" "If you're referring to what I did in the cavalry battle, I am only giving what the country wants," Izuku replied frigidly. "Whether or not you want to see it as a game rests with your perception." Shadow was clearly gritting his teeth now. It looked as if he wanted to bite something back, but he was visibly restraining himself. "If that is all, I'm leaving." Izuku began to turn back into the stadium. "Wait." Izuku stopped. "What?" Shadow had unclenched his teeth, though his eyes were still no less stormy. "Why do you want to be a hero?" "To be one for those whose only crime is to be born as they are," Izuku replied under no uncertain terms. "Why do you ask?" Shadow shut his eyes, as if mentally composing himself. "What do you know about Quirk marriages?" Izuku ate his lunch, admittedly, rather slowly. It was kind of expected, given that a huge bombshell of a revelation had been dropped by Shadow in that nondescript corridor, in the process robbing him of his appetite. If it weren't for the fact that he was still participating in the festival, he would have foregone lunch altogether. His worldview had been upended. Yes, he knew Endeavor was abrasive, rough, and very set on snatching the #1 title from All Might, but forcing an impoverished woman into a Quirk marriage just to sire a child who could one day overtake the symbol of peace in his stead, physically abusing his family for stepping out of line, causing the disappearance of his eldest child, and driving his wife insane to the point that she splashed boiling water over Shadow's left side because it reminded her too much of her abusive husband. He might have lost his emotions, but even his stomach churned with every sordid, traumatizing detail that Shadow revealed. Suddenly, a great deal of past events and behaviors made sense. Why Shadow was so dead set on not becoming like his father, why he refused to use the fire that Endeavor had cursed him with, and why he was so determined to win the festival with only his eyes. In his classmate's mind, it was the biggest fuck you to Endeavor if he won without once using his fire in combat, and in theory, it should work. Reality, unfortunately, doesn't work like that. Izuku couldn't blame Shadow for his choice of action. However, his dual Quirk classmate has been blinded by his desire for vengeance. Unlike his own cryokinetic powers, Shadow's Quirk had drawbacks. His Quirk was half ice, half fire for a reason. It was meant to provide a thermodynamic balance between the two polar opposites. If one was overused with complete neglect for the other, Shadow's body temperature would become dangerously unbalanced. And since he favored his ice, he swallowed his last bite. If what he heard was correct, the last round will be one-on-one battles between the finalists. Should he ever be pitted against Shadow, he will somehow need to open his classmate's eyes before he causes irreparable harm to his body. "Midoriya." Izuku stopped in his tracks. Anjiro, the tailed blonde, approached him with an extremely troubled look. "What is it? Have you seen the one-on-one brackets yet?" "I haven't." "You'll be up against Shinsu from 1 degree Celsius." Izuku vaguely remembered seeing that name as the second-place team from the cavalry battle event. "I was supposed to be up against him, but I decided to pull out of the festival." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "My honor was violated," Mashiro explained, lips drawn tight. "Shinsu has a brainwashing Quirk, voice activated. He put me and several others under his control without our consent so that we could be his animals for the cavalry battle. I can't, under good conscience, continue like this. Please, Midoriya, when you go up against him, teach him a lesson, will you?" Izuku nodded, before continuing on his way. Once again, his mind slipped into analytical mode. A voice-activated brainwashing Quirk, incredibly valuable in covert stealth operations and underground hero work, but shrouded with horrific stigma. Izuku was willing to bet that this Shinsu did not have a happy childhood, with the strong possibility of being thrown out into the system. Foster homes and orphanages, from what he has read before, were not kind places for those perceived to have villainous quirks. School was no better, given his own experiences as a previously quirkless individual. From the sound of things, Shinsu wanted to be a hero, but a voice-activated brainwashing Quirk is effectively useless against giant robots, which explained why he was placed in general education. Also, him doing whatever it takes to win the sports festival and get bumped up into the heroics course was understandable. However, what Shinsu was doing to achieve that goal was questionable, and doing no favors to win him respect from others. Either way, he was about to face Shinsu in battle. And despite understanding his circumstances, he wasn't going to let Shinsu walk over him. He won't forget his plan, though. Ladies and gentlemen, plus everyone in between, welcome back to the final round of the UE Sports Festival. The crowd cheered with deafening excitement. We have come very far with plenty of entertaining performances thus far, as we are now down to the last 16 finalists, who will win this year's festival and take home the gold. It all depends on how far they will take plus ultra to the limits. Inside a darkened hallway, Izuku waited for the moment present Mike was to introduce him to the stadium. Arms crossed, his foot tapped against the floor, eyes closed in improvised meditation. He will make this match quick, but he will also never forget. The metal doors in front of him rumbled and began to open, presenting to you all the Ice King of 1A, Midoriya Izuku. Applause echoing around him. Izuku stepped out and made his way up the elevated stage that was the battlefield. Midnight stood on platform at one side, right along the midpoint of the field, fiddling with her cat o'9 tails absently. Once Izuku had taken his place, another set of metal doors across from him opened, and presenting one of only 2 general education students to make it thus far, Shinsu Hitoshi from 1 degree Celsius. Izuku got his first good look of his opponent. Hitoshi was taller than him by about 10 centimeters, though his gravity-defying hair appeared to add to his height. That was, by far, the only advantage Hitoshi had. Physically, he was practically a stick compared to Izuku. Furthermore, it was apparent that insomnia was a constant plague for Hitoshi, if the unhealthy-looking eye bags were any indication. Hitoshi sauntered up with almost resigned acceptance, as if he already knew the outcome of this match. Still, there was an ember of determination within those indifferent, tired irises. Izuku knew that it was for naught, though. Midnight raised her cat o'9 tails. I want a fair and clean match, and you may begin. Hitoshi barely got to open his mouth before he was entirely encased in ice. Midnight counted down in her head, before declaring, Shinsu Hitoshi has been incapacitated. Midoriya Izuku progresses to the next bracket. Izuku immediately vanished the ice, releasing Hitoshi from his frigid prison. Trembling from the cold, the insomniac looked up to see his opponent already leaving the stage for the metal doors. Gritting his teeth, he picked himself up and sauntered off in the opposite direction. Izuku didn't want to join his classmates up in their designated seating gallery, so he busied himself with getting a drink from a vending machine. He went to his locker to grab his wallet and found a vending machine a short while later. Good on Nezu's part to give him a weekly allowance. Gives him the chance to indulge in small treats every now and then. Midoriya-kun. Izuku turned to the side. Speak of the rodent and he will appear. Nezu-san, what are you doing here? I wanted to congratulate you on your win. Midoriya-kun. Nezu chirped, also, getting a drink for yourself. I think I'll get one too. Izuku stepped aside, allowing the principal to slip some coins into the machine and buy a hot cup of tea for himself. Nezu-san, you're here for something else other than to congratulate me, aren't you? Beady eyes turned to the Ice King, gleaming slightly. Nezu chuckled. I can't get anything past you, can I? But on a serious note, while I was watching your match against Shinsu-kun, you had a look of determination that wasn't entirely dedicated to winning. Care to share your thoughts? Izuku replied bluntly. I want Shinsu Hitoshi transferred into the heroics course, specifically into 1A. Your reason, if any. Shinsu's quirk is invaluable for hero work, especially undercover and stealth operations, but he was at a disadvantage during the entrance exam since his quirk was useless against robots. You will be doing a major disservice to not just Shinsu, but the industry at large if you do not allow Shinsu to reach his fullest potential. Nezu nodded. Very well. I will have him transferred immediately. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Just like that. Just like that. Nezu confirmed, no further questions asked. Partly because I agree with you, Midoriya-kun, that the entrance exam is unfairly biased towards combative quirks, and I am in the process of bringing the school board up to task with a complete overhaul. And mainly because I wish to use this opportunity to make amends. Izuku's eyebrow remained raised. What Aizawa did after the USJ incident, while to the books, was incredibly flawed. In having you arrested for saving your classmates and teachers, Aizawa has betrayed you and destroyed any trust that we managed to foster with you. I wish to rebuild the bridge that once connected us, and show that you still have me for support. The eyebrow settled. I can acknowledge your efforts. However, I still don't trust Aizawa-sensei, and I probably never will anymore. I understand, and you are within your rights to do so, Nezu replied agreeably. Come, Midoriya-kun, let's go get Shinsu-kun, shall we? Izuku nodded. Cheer up, Shinsu. There's always next year. The lilac-haired insomniac resisted the urge to snap at his well-meaning classmate. He didn't want to hear their platitudes and pity. It wasn't going to change the fact that he lost, both his match and his chance to get into the heroics program. He didn't hear the cheers of the spectators as the next 2 finalists took their places on the field to duke it out. He heard the voices, cutting and harsh, from unloving parents and foster guardians, the mocking sneers and laughs of previous peers and classmates, slicing at his fragile heart and soul, tearing his dreams and aspirations, branding him as a villain despite never having committed a single crime in his life. Dear God, they were right, weren't they? What was his villainous brainwashing quirk against those powerful, flashy, heroic quirks that completely overshadowed him? He would never amount to anything. His short performance can attest to that. He's just a useless wannabe with a villainous quirk. Hey, Shinsu Hitoshi. The entire 1 degrees Celsius seating gallery fell silent. Hitoshi looked up and froze. Standing next to his seat were Midoriya Izuku and, more terrifyingly, Principal Nezu. "Can you follow us, please? We won't take long." Oh fuck. This was the end, was it? He was going to get kicked out of UA. He was going to get a damning black mark on his already stained report, which will prevent him from enrolling into online courses. He was going to lose his future. Nothing more than a life on the streets and resorting to crime just to survive. "You're not in trouble," Nezu chirped, snapping him out of his downward spiral. "We just need you to follow us to a more private setting. There is something important we need to discuss." Still uncertain of his fate, Hitoshi got up from his seat and followed the pair out of the seating gallery. Into a quiet hallway they went, away from the main action. "Shinsu-kun," Nezu began. "You've been dealt many bad hands in life, quite unfairly too, since it all stems from your quirk and the endemic bigotry that runs through our society today." Hitoshi was confused. What was the principal talking about? You wanted to prove the naysayers wrong by becoming a hero. You participated in the entrance exam to take that next big step. But again, the bias and prejudice of society reared its head once more through giant robots, forcing you into general education. Why was Nezu bringing up his failure? The sports festival was your next chance, and even though you were eliminated, the door has not closed on you, young Shinsu. Thanks to a strong recommendation from Midoriya-kun here, you will be transferred into the heroics program, effective from next Monday onwards. What? Hitoshi had to be hallucinating. Or dreaming, perhaps. He must have fallen asleep at the seating gallery and he was dreaming this moment right now. You will be posted into Class 1A, taking a spot vacated by a former student who was expelled for perverse behavior towards his classmate. This is your moment, Shinsu Hitoshi. This is your chance to prove yourself. Your hero academia awaits you. Hitoshi did the one thing he was capable of doing right now. He keeled backwards and fainted. Consciousness came back to Hitoshi gradually. The first thing he registered is that he was lying on something soft. At first, his thought he was back in his room. That this was all just an elaborate dream, Principal Nezu coming to him to personally transfer him into the heroics program. Everything. He would wake up in his squalid room, stuck in harsh reality, once again having to face an unloving foster family who took him in only out of necessity to qualify for welfare benefits. But then his mind realized, the mattress is soft, far from the ratty, concrete-like slab that he has been forced to sleep on for several years thus far. It was enough to jolt him completely back into the physical world. "Good to see that you're awake." His eyes whipped to the side. Izuku was sitting by the bed, expressionless, while Recovery Girl worked on helping Denki recover from short-circuiting his brain once more following his disastrous match against Shizaki Ibara from 1B. "Where am I?" In Recovery Girl's temporary infirmary, Izuku replied, "You fainted after Nezu told you that you will be transferring into the heroics program come Monday. I carried you here." Hitoshi blinked. "Wait, so I didn't dream the entire thing. Do you want me to pinch you?" Izuku offered. "No need." Hitoshi immediately refused. Izuku nodded. Principal Nezu went ahead to finalize the transfer paperwork. "I was supposed to watch over you until you woke up." "Thanks, by the way, for everything," said Hitoshi. "It was the right thing to do," Izuku replied. "Now, before I go, there's something you need to do. Which is, when you come to 1 next Monday, you need to apologize to Ajiro Mashiro." "Who?" "The blonde with the tail," Izuku said. "Or rather, one of your teammates during the cavalry battle. You used your quirk on him without his consent, and he was so upset about it that he pulled out of the festival. I do not wish for animosity or tension when you join my class, and it is only right that you apologize for using your quirk without consent on the other party." Judging from his rather clueless expression, Hitoshi had not even realized he had committed such a transgression. Nonetheless, he nodded. "Good, I'll see you around then." Izuku got up and left the infirmary, allowing Recovery Girl to come over and assess Hitoshi. Judging from present Mike's announcements, Momo was about to go up against Fumiko. 2 more matches and it will be the quarterfinals. He might as well join the rest of his class. As Izuku disappeared through the doorway, Hitoshi fell back onto the bed, heart racing. He still couldn't believe that he was on track to becoming a hero, all because his opponent saw through the barriers erected by his naysayers, tore them down, and somehow pulled strings to convince Principal Nezu to have him transferred. Furthermore, Izuku's snow-white hair glistened under the light, falling just below broad shoulders, continued on by a body with muscles that far outshone his own stick-like frame. His heart raced just a bit faster. Damn, Midoriya Izuku was so cool. Fumiko ended up winning her match against Momo by using Dark Shadow to knock the class representative out of bounds before she could properly exhibit her capability. After that, Ijiru went up against Tetsu from 1B. That match ended in a draw since both combatants were on equal levels of power and wore each other down to exhaustion. A tiebreaker was declared in the interval before the quarterfinals. Izuku paid close attention to the final match of the preliminary round, Bakugo Katsuki vs Uraraka Ochako. And to put things simply, it was a shit show. Both went all out on each other, but Katsuki was especially vicious. Izuku knew that the explosive blonde had a vendetta against him, and Katsuki will do whatever it takes to advance, even if it meant nearly beating Ochako to death. Present Mike was rendered silent by Katsuki's unusual bloodthirstiness. While Ochako put up a commendable fight, the explosions that rocked the stadium were so overpowered that Midnight nearly called the match off for the safety of both combatants. In the end, Ochako decided to forfeit. Her parting words drove the point home. I'd rather not be killed by someone that acts more like a villain than a human being. Naturally, that set off Katsuki. Who are you calling a villain, you motherfucking bitch? I'll fucking kill you. Cementos intervened by producing several concrete walls between the explosive blonde and Ochako. Midnight pointed her cat o' nine tails at him. Bakugo Katsuki, stand down, otherwise you will be disqualified for dishonorable behavior. Izuku swore he could almost hear Katsuki's gnashing his teeth in frustration. Finally, the blonde screamed bloody murder and stomped off the field, allowing the tiebreaker match between Ijiru and Tetsu to commence. Izuku wasn't sure how long that match was going to take, but he got up from his seat anyway. He needed to prepare. Izuku checked the quarterfinal brackets. He was up against Shoto, and his match was the first right after the tiebreaker and the short intermission that is to follow. All in all, he had about 20 minutes before he was due to step out onto the field once more. He knew that the match was going to be intense, so he best get himself into the optimal headspace, both to win the match and to convince Shoto to cease his petty, self-destructive pursuit of vengeance. Izuku leaned back against a wall, eyes closed as he slipped into deep meditation. He took hold of the storm of ice and snow spinning inside of him, reinforcing his control over his power. The hallway became colder as snowflakes began to fall around him. They danced around him in windless swirls, gently caressing his skin and trailing against his hair. Just like always, he was in tune with the frigid cold, until an unwelcome heat radiated towards him. Heavy footsteps approached. With his ice melting away, Izuku opened his eyes and turned to the source of the heat. He looked up, staring with a seemingly uninterested look at the fiery glare of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. I've been looking for you. Izuku moved away from the wall to properly face the towering man. What is it? You will be facing off against my masterpiece soon, Endeavor said. I want you to give him a worthy fight, and Izuku didn't let him finish. Why should I listen to you, Enduhor? A beat of silence. What did you just call me? Izuku crossed his arms. Are you deaf? I called you Enduhor. Surely you know your own hero name, right? The man's fires intensified. Listen here, boy. I am the number 2 hero, and I demand respect, adoration, reverence. Frankly speaking, you deserve none of those. Izuku interrupted once more. Can you really call yourself a hero when you are nothing more than a power-hungry, sadistic domestic abuser who inflicted physical harm upon your family, caused your eldest child to disappear, and drove your wife insane? Endeavor was about to rebut, but the mention of Taoya's disappearance rendered him stunned for a moment. All that was needed for Izuku to continue his spiel in absolute monotone. Todoroki Enji, you are the textbook definition of the worst of humanity. You are reckless, have no regard for your fellow hero or civilian, and your personality and behavior is as desired as a pile of poo that someone defecated in the open. You are a blight upon the world, a stain on the good name of heroics. How in the world you got your license, only the heavens know. But that does not hide the fact that you are a monster who haunts the nightmares of children. You are no hero, you are just a motherfucking villain. The flames exploded. You insolent brat. Time slowed down. Izuku's deadpan did not change, even as Endeavor hurled a fist straight at his face. He did, however, thrust a hand up, and his ice burst from the floor between the man's legs. Let it be known that many male pro-heroes, in their complacency about the strength of their quirks, never include any kind of protection for their groins in their outfits. Endeavor was one of them. Izuku blinked as blood splattered over his face and uniform. Just a few inches his nose, impaled on icicles, were 3 important organs for human reproduction. He couldn't help but note that the long part wasn't exactly long, and the 2 orbs looked rather shriveled. Endeavor didn't squeal or scream. He simply passed out from the pain and fell to the floor in a heap. Well, I better inform Recovery Girl about this. Izuku turned on his heel and hurried down the corridor. Hopefully he didn't miss his match. It was a match for the history books, a clash between 2 Ice Kings, vying to triumph over the other and advance to the next bracket. It would be foolish for those watching live and from their screens to turn away right now. The son of Endeavor and the undefeated Rising Star facing off against each other in a duel of ice and snow was something not to be missed. This was evidently clear in 2 locations in different parts of the country. In the Todoroki residence, siblings Fayumi and Natsuo sat before the television screen in quiet anticipation. The latter had returned from university to keep his sister company while they watched their youngest sibling participate in the sports festival. It wouldn't be accurate to describe the atmosphere as tense, but there was a sense of uneasiness. Both were very well aware of Shado's vendetta against their father and his blatant refusal to use his left side, and thus far, his performance in the rounds and against his opponents. Shadow has remained stubbornly steadfast in his defiance. They didn't expect anything else with the upcoming match. Midoriya-kun also has an ice quirk, doesn't he? Said Fayumi. It's incredibly strong, Natsuo remarked, perhaps even stronger than Shadow's ice. Fayumi played with her fingers, a tick she had when uneasy. Will Shadow overwork himself in this match? Natsuo grimaced, very well aware of the drawbacks. I really hope not. Elsewhere, in a seedy bar located in the bad side of Yokohama City, a heavily scarred young man with dyed black hair and skin grafts stapled to the patches of untouched skin was also watching the sports festival, idly holding a shot glass of vodka, going by the pseudonym of Dabai. He too paid close attention to Shadow as he advanced through the rounds with just the ice on his right side, deliberately ignoring the fire of his left. Several other patrons tried to talk to him about the proceedings, but one snarl and a demonstration of his blue flames kept them away. He didn't want to be disturbed. He had to see for himself if Endeavor's masterpiece was going to run himself to the ground by remaining defiant of the monster who sired him and his siblings. He downed his shot glass and called for another. Either way, this is a match that was going to be incredibly riveting. Welcome back to the quarterfinals of the Yui Sports Festival, everyone. We are down to our last 8 participants, ready to go and eyes on the top prize. Izuku released a cold breath. He couldn't completely wash the blood off his uniform, but it didn't matter much. He was a teen on a mission right now, and a little blood was nothing compared to the absolute mayhem that he knew was about to come. The doors opened with a rumble. It is a clash of snow and ice, 2 kings battling it out in blizzards and whiteouts. Please welcome Midoriya Izuku from 1A. Izuku stepped out amidst applause and cheers. Across from him, the other set of doors opened. Give a round of applause to the son of Endeavor, Todoroki Shadow. Both Ice Kings have cool set expressions, but one burned with fiery determination to come out on top, the other stonily cold with a different determination. Midnight raised her cat o' 9 tails. Go all out, children, but no funny business. Begin. Shadow started with a predictable move. A glacier raced across the field and trap Izuku and immobilize him. However, it didn't get close enough since Izuku simply swung a hand out and reduced the ice to harmless particles. His wings then burst out of his back, and Izuku raced towards Shadow, ice crackling over his hands. The dual quirk teen responded with a wall of ice to protect himself from any attacks. Izuku simply made it vanish and unleashed a hailstorm upon his opponent. Barely a minute in, and Todoroki is already on the defensive, as Midoriya is simply too strong for him. Shadow grit his teeth. He surged forward and raised a pillar of ice out of the ground to knock Izuku out of the air. Izuku flew backwards and somersaulted to avoid getting hit. He then retaliated with a freezing cold blast of snow that temporarily froze Shadow to the ground. However, that didn't last long as the dual quirk teen managed to break his feet out of the ice and continue on with the battle. The exchange quickly turned into a stalemate. Both would trade attacks, with Izuku often turning Shadow's ice against him. In turn, Shadow would retaliate, resuming the cycle once more. As the battle dragged on, murmurs began to filter through the spectators. While it was thrilling to see such strong displays of power, it was, admittedly, becoming rather boring. Come on, Present Mike whined. Are we going to get stuck in another back and forth? Where's the excitement? Give us something new already. Shadow saw this as his cue to push his ice even further. But as the match continued, the drawback began to take its toll. As Izuku destroyed a storm of icy projectiles, he noticed that his opponent's movements were growing sluggish and labored. Shadow's breaths came out of frozen mist, and ice was already creeping all over his body, including his left side. His attacks came out sloppily, some even missing Izuku altogether. He had to intervene now. Todoroki, don't do this to yourself. Use your fire. Despite the obvious pain he was in, Shadow remained defiant. I will never use his fire. Another blast of ice followed, though Izuku simply vanished them with a flick of her wrist. You are playing right into his hands by being petty, Izuku continued. You are letting his past control your present. You are merely hurting yourself like this. Shadow moved to attack, but with his body quickly freezing over, moving was almost impossible. He fell to the ground, shivering violently. Did that bastard buy you out? Did he pay you to TT trample on my hope that you will understand? Izuku's cold irises flashed. Why would he buy me out when I had his reproductive organs ripped out of his groin? One could almost hear the record scratch to a stop. In another part of Musutafu, Fayumi's teacup fell from her hands and shattered against the hardwood floor. Natsuo completely lost the ability to verbalize his words, instead making unintelligible noises as he pointed at the screen. In Yokohama, Dabai was in the midst of a sip when the fateful words left Izuku's lips to be broadcasted across the entire nation. Not only did he do a spit take, he dropped the glass, where it shattered on the floor, just like with Fayumi's teacup. Shadow thought he was hearing things. What? Izuku stretched out a hand and began pulling the ice away from his opponent's body. Endeavor tried to punch my head in for saying things he didn't like to hear. I reacted in self-defense, and my ice skewered his reproductive organs and tore them out from his groin. From the looks of things, he won't be able to have any more children anytime soon. It took a full second for absolute bedlam to break out. The spectators were on their feet, shouting and pointing. Present Mike tried to restore order to absolutely no avail. Social media exploded with tweets, posts, and videos coming in by the thousands as the wider population reacted with a mix of horror, outrage, and admiration at Izuku's alleged actions. Fayumi had gone completely frozen, convinced that the tea she had been drinking was actually some kind of hallucinogen. The man of fire that she had feared her entire life defeated by a mere first year with an ice quirk. She had to be hallucinating. There isn't any other possible reason. Natsuo wasn't any better, but his reaction was more explosive. He first slid down from the sofa onto the floor. When the realization finally comprehended, a snort escaped his lips, followed by a giggle, then a chuckle, before it quickly escalated into full-blown laughter. It was a mix of manic joy and crazed delirium, high-pitched and breathless. If it weren't for the furniture in the room, Natsuo would have started rolling around the floor as he laughed himself into a frenzy. Dabai had no such reservations. Paying no heed to the other patrons, the scarred man laughed like a loon, rolling around the floor as the others watched with a mix of bemusement and stupor. Those who were regulars at the bar knew Dabai's intense hatred for Endeavor, so his rolling laughter was not unexpected. Still, they too were stunned that the number 2 hero was defeated by a mere first year. It was simply inconceivable, but the facts are the facts. Back in the stadium, Izuku wasn't done yet. What Endeavor did to you and your family is abhorrent, beyond villainous and absolutely evil. You have every right to desire vengeance and justice for the wrongs committed against you. But pettiness and defiance are not the answer. Endeavor will just see it as justification to hurt you even more. Don't deny your left side. You are meant to be half cold and half hot. Endeavor may have passed fire into you, but it is yours to wield, to save yourself and others with both fire and ice. That is the most effective fuck you can give to Endeavor. Do not let your blood be your prison. Todoroki Shadow, take control of your life and write your own path to heroism. It was a single spark before the explosion. Embers began wafting off Shadow's left shoulder, followed by smoke. Years of pent-up emotions roared to the surface like rising magma. And with a loud cry, Shadow ignited into a conflagration of hellfire. Izuku drew his hand back to shield his eyes from the blinding light of his opponent's fire. Amidst the roar of the flames, the spectators were shouting once more. Present Mike had long foregone trying to rein the crowd back into order and was screaming commentary like a child high on sugar, watching the entire scene live on television. Fayumi covered her slackened mouth with trembling hands. He did it. Midoriya actually got Shadow to use his fire. Natsuo stared at the screen from the floor and turned to his sister with hazy eyes. Fayumi, I'm going to marry him. That snapped her out of her amazement. And Natsuo, what are you talking about? You heard me, sis. I'm going to marry Midoriya Izuku, and you can't stop me. Over in Yokohama, Dabai had recovered from his laughing spell and watched with relaxed satisfaction as Shadow burned. He thought to himself, Midoriya Izuku, thank you. You are a true hero. And back in the stadium, Izuku called out to his opponent, feels good, doesn't it, when you're no longer holding yourself back? Tears streamed down Shadow's face, quickly evaporating from the intense heat. Why are you going so far? Heroes need saving too. And you deserve to be saved. Shadow, you're insane, you know that. You could have defeated me easily. But instead, I know, but even so, this is more satisfying than just winning outright. Shadow's lips spread into a manic smile. You do know that I now have an advantage over you, right? Fire triumphs ice, after all. Izuku closed his eyes for a moment and opened them again. So you say, Shadow. Before anyone could react, Izuku stretched out a hand and unleashed a blizzard right at his opponent. Shadow was instantly frozen in a glacier several meters thick and higher than the stadium roof itself. The flames that roared from his left side were now entirely extinguished, steam rising up from the rapidly cooling heat. Izuku lowered his hand and turned to Midnight. She raised her cat o' 9 tails after a mental countdown. Todoroki Shadow has been incapacitated. Midoriya Izuku progresses to the semi-finals. As soon as the match was called, Izuku unfroze Shadow out of the glacier. The sheer cold had knocked the dual quirk teen out, his unconscious body falling to the ground once he was freed. Izuku went over and carefully picked his opponent up into a bridal carry. With a nod to Midnight, he left the stage, carrying Shadow to Recovery Girl's medical station for a dose of healing quirk and much-needed rest. After dropping Shadow off, he went back to 1A's seating gallery to spectate the rest of the quarter-final matches. Admittedly, those matches were rather dull in comparison. Tenya won his match quickly by literally speed-running Shizaki Ibara from 1B out of bounds. Fumiko took slightly longer to end Mina's sports festival run by baiting the acid producer to flood the stage with her quirk and then send her sliding out of bounds with a well-timed push. And while the match between Ijiru and Bakugo was extremely explosive and full of action, that got dull after a short while. With the fighting dragging out the minutes, Izuku tuned out the action and closed his eyes, hoping to pass the time by taking a short nap. Izuku was able to sleep for a short while, waking up once Bakugo had knocked Ijiru out with one overpowered explosion that not even the redhead's hardening quirk could endure. With that, the quarterfinals came to a close. President Mike called for a short 15-minute intermission to allow Cementos to repair the field and give the semi-finalists time to prepare. Izuku checked the brackets. He will be up against Tenya, while Fumiko would be facing off against Bakugo. He pitied the raven-headed girl. Dark Shadow worked best in environments with low light, against Bakugo with his blinding explosions and loud noise. The match was pretty much in the bag for the explosive brat, though, in retrospect, the same conclusion could be said for him too. After the intermission had ended and the field repaired, President Mike welcomed everyone back with the start of the semi-finals. Once again, the Ice King that is Midoriya Izuku takes the stage. So far, he has defeated opponent after opponent without so much as a blink. Izuku took his place at his end of the field. Across from him, the doors opened, and Tenya strode out with fierce determination. Will Ice be able to trounce the speed of engines? Ada Tenya takes the stage as Midoriya's next opponent before the finals. Izuku inwardly grimaced. Sure, he was the favorite, but there was no need for President Mike to make it so blatantly obvious. What happened to impartiality in a competition? To his credit, Tenya didn't appear fazed by the voice hero's inherent bias. Instead, he called out across the field, "May the best win." Izuku nodded to show his acknowledgement. Midnight squealed, "Such sportsmanship. Now, go all out, children, but no funny business." She cracked her cat o' nine tails, and the match began. And ended a second later when Izuku unleashed his ice and froze Tenya in his tracks, immobilizing the taller teen. After 10 seconds, Midnight cracked her cat o' nine tails once more. Ada Tenya is incapacitated. Midoriya Izuku progresses to the finals. As the spectators applauded, Izuku unfroze his bespectacled classmate. Despite looking visibly disappointed, Tenya went over and shook Izuku's hand firmly. "Good match, Midoriya." Likewise, Izuku nodded. Both students vacated the field. While Izuku went up to join the rest of their classmates in the seating gallery, Tenya went to a quiet corridor away from the main hub of activity. Now all by himself, the strong facade dropped from his face, and he sighed in disappointment. It hurt to lose, even though he half expected it with an opponent like Izuku. Still, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more that he could have done. Whether he could have turned the match in his favor if he did something. Tenya sighed. He hated when his emotions and thoughts flew out of control. He favored stability, something to ground himself before he got tossed around by the winds of uncertainty and what-ifs. He went to do the one thing that always provided him with such stability. Returning to his class locker room, he retrieved his phone, intending to call his older brother for some much-needed emotional support. Instead, he saw several missed calls from his mother, with another one on the way. He answered his phone. "Mum." "Tenya." Hearing the frantic tone of her voice, Tenya was immediately worried. "Mum, what happened?" "Your brother, he's been taken to the hospital." "He was attacked." Tenya almost dropped his phone. Meanwhile, Izuku watched the match between Fumiko and Bakugo with rapt attention. Even though he knew that it was a foregone conclusion, he was interested to see how Fumiko would tackle the explosive grenade that was Bakugo. Make no mistake, Fumiko put up a commendable fight, but when faced against the near-constant explosions that even Izuku found irritating for his eyes, Dark Shadow was unable to do much. Fumiko was forced to engage in hand-to-hand combat. However, against a long-range fighter like Bakugo, that didn't give her much leverage. In the end, just as he expected, Bakugo won the match after blasting Fumiko out of bounds. President Mike called for another short intermission to give Cementos time to repair the field, but as Izuku got up to prepare his match against his childhood adversary, the voice hero suddenly announced, due to a family emergency, Ada Tenya has to withdraw from the festival. Takoyami Fumiko will take the second runner-up position. Family emergency. Wonder what happened. Izuku then remembered. Ada has an older brother, Ingenium. Did something happen to him? As he made his way down to the field again, he made a mental note to check the news later for any updates. After the field was repaired, it was time for the pivotal moment of the entire tournament. This is it, folks. At long last, we have come down to the finals of the first-year sports festival. The spectators cheered and applauded. Despite the admittedly repetitive performances by Izuku, there was still palpable excitement in the air. Present Mike framed that excitement perfectly. Explosions versus ice. The odds are not as clear as before. Who will win and emerge triumphant? It all boils down to this one match between two kings of equal power. Inside his holding tunnel, Izuku rolled his eyes. Now then, let's get this show on the road. Present Mike hyped up the spectators. Please give a rousing cheer for the Ice King of 1A, Midoriya Izuku. The doors opened, and Izuku stepped out for what was to be the last time. Taking his place on the field, he watched with empty eyes as the doors across from him opened, introducing the only general education student to remain in the festival, Bakugo Katsuki from 1 degree Celsius. Izuku took silent vindication as the applause was significantly muted. Bakugo stomped out onto the field with murderous intent. No doubt, the blonde was going to do whatever he could to ensure that Izuku was going to end up as a bloody splatter under his boot. Izuku doesn't even deign to properly acknowledge Bakugo, which prompted the satisfying sound of grinding teeth. Midnight gave Bakugo a long, wary glance before declaring, there had better not be any funny business in this match. Go all out, but don't even think of doing anything illegal. She cracked her cat o' nine tails. DKU. Before Bakugo could even launch himself across the field to attack, Izuku's ice was already moving. Bakugo was immobilized, his boots encased in ice. However, the sharp-eyed would notice that the ice wasn't particularly thick. Anyone with Bakugo's quirk and strength could easily break free and attack. Questions and murmurs began to rise from the spectators. Even more so, when Izuku turned on his heel and began walking towards the boundary line. What's this? Midoriya is jeopardizing his chances of winning. To the normal layperson, this would appear to be the case. But for someone like Bakugo, Izuku turning his back on him had another meaning. It was a clear dismissal. That Bakugo was not worth Izuku's time or effort. Bakugo was just as important as a piece of gravel stuck to the sole of Izuku's shoe. Basically, Bakugo was a nobody to Izuku. And for someone with a massive ego like the explosive blonde, it was as if Izuku had spat on him. He saw red. I will fucking kill you. Screaming bloody murder, Bakugo broke free of the ice and propelled himself with his explosion. He had intended to grab Izuku and reduce him to a bloody pulp. Rules and festival be damned. He never got the chance. Bakugo, in his blind rage, failed to notice how close Izuku had gotten to the boundary line. Also, as he was moving at top speed, he could not stop himself from what was about to happen. Izuku suddenly turned on his heel, grabbed Bakugo's habitual right hook, and threw him over his shoulder. Right out of bounds. Absolute silence filled the stadium for a good 15 seconds. Midnight blinked. She shook herself out of her stupor to call the match. Bakugo Katsuki is out of bounds. Midoriya Izuku is the winner of the first-year sports festival. Fireworks burst in quick succession all around the upper perimeter of the stadium. Loud orchestral music blasts from speakers, amidst the cheer of the spectators. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. Present Mike begins. After many breathtaking and heart-pumping hours of action and drama, we have come to the end of the first-year sports festival. All of the students, save for 4, have gathered on the field in neat rows. It is time to bring this to a satisfying close. It's all on you, Kayama. Thanks, Azashi. Midnight nods. Now, I understand that we're all exhausted after a long day of excitement, but I hope we can scrape up our last vestiges of energy to congratulate our top 3 finalists. The spectators cheer. That's right. It's time for the awards ceremony. Behind the R18 heroine, a great blast of smoke and confetti rise from the ground, followed by a slight rumble. A 3-tiered podium rises, bringing the top 3 contenders into view. Most of the students, for lack of a better term, are gobsmacked. What the fuck? Kayuka eloquently summarizes the general feeling. Very few pay attention to Izuku and Fumiko. Most, if not all, eyes are on Bakugo. The explosive blonde is literally restrained against a concrete pillar. Muzzled like a rabid dog and hands secured with quirk-suppressant cuffs and a giant padlock-like mechanism, Bakugo thrashes against his restraints, screaming unintelligibly. Beside him, Izuku glances at his former bully and barely stops himself from rolling his eyes. These 3 have given their best to triumph over their peers, and there is only one person who is worthy of presenting them their medals. Booming laughter echoes overhead, and the spectators go absolutely crazy. This time, Izuku does not stop himself from rolling his eyes with contempt. On the roof, a silhouette stands against the afternoon sun. Give it up for the symbol of peace. Good citizens, I am here. All Might accidentally interrupts Midnight's introduction. An awkward silence befalls the stadium. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I spoke over you. All Might flashes a thumbs up. No problem. A robot comes forth, carrying a tray with all 3 medals. Midnight takes the tray and goes up to All Might. It's all on you now. The symbol of peace takes the bronze medal and comes up to Fumiko, young Takoyami. Congratulations on a job well done. Thank you, sir. Fumiko nods. All Might steps closer and wraps Fumiko in a hug. However, in order to fight better against different types of quirks, you must learn to not fully rely on your own quirk. If you continue to build up your physical strength, victory will be easier to obtain. Yes, sir, I'll remember that. All Might then moves over to Bakugo. The man's smile becomes strained. Young Bakugo ... Izuku takes silent vindication over All Might being incredibly uncomfortable before the rabid dog that is Bakugo. The hero takes extreme caution to undo Bakugo's muzzle, since it looks like the blonde is all but ready to bite the man's hands off. Now, young Bakugo, don't fret too much. You win some, and you lose some, says All Might. Take this as an opportunity to further improve yourself. I'm sure victory will be yours next time. I don't fucking care. I refuse to accept that shitty medal. Bakugo screams. All Might laughs awkwardly. Come now, you don't really mean that. He tries to put the silver medal around the blonde's neck, but Bakugo is busy trying to avoid the strip of tri-colored ribbon. Eventually, All Might just drapes the medal over Bakugo's jaw and steps back before any damage could be done. He is eager to move on to Izuku with the gold. Young Midoriya, congratulations on your victory. You have shown unbelievable power and skill with your quirk, and commendable sportsmanship with your fellow competitors. You are the shining example of what a Yui heroic student should be. Allow me to honor your victory by presenting you with your medal. Izuku stares coldly at All Might. It is a 180 from Bakugo's explosive temper, but it leaves the hero no less uncomfortable. Clearing his throat, he places the medal around Izuku's neck, and quickly turns around to avoid the piercing gaze staring straight into his soul. And there we have it. All Might booms. While we congratulate our top 3 winners, let us not forget that every one of you stood a chance of placing on the podium today. Reflect on your performance. Let it be a learning opportunity for future growth and increased potential. He spreads his arms wide. Today has been an important milestone in your journeys to becoming full-fledged heroes. It fills me with pride to see you all grow strong and brave against challenges and adversity. As such, there is only one thing left to say before we close today's sports festival. Say it with me, everyone. Plus ultra. The stadium is rocked by deafening cheers and applause. Present Mike takes over for the last time. And with that, we have come to the end of the sports festival. Please take care on your way home. And for all students, have a good rest. This is Present Mike. And Aizawa Shouta. Signing off. Present Mike concludes for them both. Izuku hangs back while his classmates return to their respective locker rooms to collect their belongings and depart for the long weekend ahead of them. There is no reason for him to rush off, since he will be trapped within Yui's walls for the next 3 days and beyond. After a quick shower and changing into a fresh set of clothes, he leaves the locker room and nearly collides with Nezu. Izuku-kun, I was just looking for you. Is there something you need? Principal Nezu, I wish to speak with you for a while. The Chimera chirps. If you could follow me to my office, I would highly appreciate it. Faced with no other choice, Izuku nods and follows Nezu back onto the main campus. They sit down in the office, where a tea set waits for them on the table. Care for some tea? No thanks. More for me then. Nezu chirps, helping himself to a cup. Izuku waits while the principal pours himself some tea, takes a sip, and sets the cup down on the table. What is it that you want to talk to me about? Asks Izuku. Are you aware of the ramifications of neutering the number 2 hero on live television, broadcasted to the entire country? Izuku's expression does not change. I am aware that every action has a consequence, but personally, I don't care that I tore Endeavor's reproductive organs out of his groin. I did what needs to be done. Nezu nods. I understand your thought process, and I agree that Endeavor is a criminal who deserves to face justice. However, I don't think you are aware of the scale of the consequences. Are you saying that you rather have my head bashed in by a man who is more of a villain than a hero? Far from it, Izuku. Nezu replies, taking another sip of his tea. I saw the security feed. You were within your rights to defend yourself. However, I need you to know that your public revelations has caused a social media firestorm that shows no sign of stopping. There are Twitter and Reddit threads calling for Endeavor's head on a pike. And last I heard, someone was arrested for vandalizing Endeavor's agency with spray-painted penises. Izuku, you must understand that Endeavor and the Hero Commission will not take this sitting down. There is a reason why Endeavor's crimes have been covered up for so long. There are people in power who helped him maintain a squeaky clean, if somewhat abrasive, image. By revealing all of his skeletons to the world, you now have a target painted on your back. The Hero Commission will stop at nothing to preserve the status quo, even if it means blood being spilt. This is news for Izuku, but rather than being intimidated, he remains frigidly calm. For the record, Yui will continue to stand by you and provide protection. Nezu reassures. However, I strongly advise you to exercise caution, especially when you embark on internships next week. Internships? Yes, Nezu nods. It is tradition after every sports festival for students to embark on work attachments and internships. This year, we're opening it up to first-year students as a pilot program, especially in the wake of the USJ invasion. While the invitations are still coming in, we can expect you to receive a few offers. Izuku nods. I suppose Aizawa-sensei will announce this next week. Yes, he will. Alright, is there anything else? Nothing else, Izuku. You're free to go. Thank you for the warning. Izuku gets up and bows. He leaves the office without a further word. As he heads back to his room, he thinks about the Hero Commission, a bunch of corrupt criminals under the guise of an organization that upholds heroism. For all that Nezu's warning holds water, these cowards who tarnish the name of heroism by covering up the worst of crimes don't scare him. If it comes to it, he'll just unleash a storm and let it rage on. The cold doesn't bother him, anyways. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.